the casinos is borrowing in the high yield market. We also have Citgo, the U.S. refinery unit of PDVSA. So, and outside of that, just more largely, we've seen a lot of issuance from hotels, casinos, a lot in the travel and leisure sector more broadly that really speaks to those sectors that need the cash right now. They're not looking to refinance debt. They just need the money wherever they can get it from.
Although, let's be clear, some of the lower-rated borrowers aren't exactly getting the best deals in the world. It's not like they're borrowing for free, right? I mean, we've seen them pledge islands. We've seen them, pledge cruise ships. We've seen them pledge, the clothes in their closet. I mean, at a certain point, their ability to borrow isn't necessarily testament to a great desire for their debt, correct?
Correct. And that's a great point, Lisa. And that's what's more remarkable, like you said, is that these are secured offerings. So there is some physical collateral protection, like an island in the case of Norwegian. But like you said, most of these deals, they're coming at double-digit interest rates. We've seen some, I think off the top of my head, up to 14% yields on some of these, which was, I believe that was Landry's, which is the operator of a casino and restaurant empire. So we've seen well into the double-digit interest rates. And like you said, these are hardly coming for free for some of the more challenged companies.
Molly Smith, thanks so much for joining us. Molly Smith is a corporate finance reporter for Bloomberg News, bringing us up to date on what has just been an extraordinary new issue market, particularly in the investment grade market, Lisa, year to date, hitting that $1 trillion mark, the earliest on record just recently. So, again, if you need cash in your investment grade rated, now is the time.
Yeah, I can just already hear people saying brrr, like the cash printing machine that the Federal Reserve is making. I mean, that's essentially what a lot of people are attributing this to, given how much the Fed's action stepping in, saying that they're going to buy corporate debt for the first time in its history, pushing down yields considerably near their all-time lows now for investment-grade companies. Still, however, the question in my mind is, at what point do investors start to price in the fact that the Fed's actions will not prevent certain companies from going bankrupt?
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at just the 10-year yield on the treasuries right now, it's down 3/30 seconds, pushing the yield up just slightly to 0.6. Let's call it 0.67% on the 10-year treasury. Just extraordinary. Quick check of the markets here. Nasdaq up 8, Dow up 165. Nasdaq down 31, S&P up 8. So a little bit of a bifurcated market right here. We will bring you all the latest on Bloomberg Markets. This is Bloomberg.
Sometimes This is an important update from the government about coronavirus symptoms and testing. If you have any one of the following symptoms, a high temperature, a new continuous cough, loss of taste or smell, you can now get tested. Do not leave home for any reason other than to get tested. Find out how to get a test and how long to isolate at nhs.uk/coronavirus. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
This shot score, Malkin again! Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunningham to Fiala, he scores!
And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
And as we get start cheering,
buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
With millions of podcasts dropping new episodes all the time, how do you keep up with all your favorites? TuneIn makes it easy. Simply head to the home screen and find your new episode section to see the latest additions.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Pulls over a man into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's Six bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship featuring Clemson and LSU.
There are going to be two champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be one team hold up the trophy.
10, plays to the 5, touchdown!
Search classic game replays to listen for free.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
The Fed action, essentially unlimited quantitative easing.
People have had the rug pulled out from under them overnight.
This could be a lower for longer hit.
The economic news seems to be getting worse and worse.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
It's possible that this is going to be a scarring recession.
The Fed is really showing that they're doing whatever it takes.
A lot of people don't expect that the economy will reopen in full.
This is really hitting industrial America, and it's a major crisis.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Coming up, is it December yet? Crisis upon crisis upon crisis. We're going to take a focus on what's going on in Washington, D.C. and how the government is dealing with the ongoing tensions within America's cities. Plus, we're going to be talking about the healthcare crisis and some of the remedies that are being put out there to treat COVID-19. Right now, though, let's get a check of those markets. Greg Jarrett has that for us with a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Off earlier, high stocks are still up, Lisa. Banks are leading the gains on the S&P, blunting losses in tech companies as the NASDAQ lags. Gun makers are extending rallies in the wake of President Donald Trump's promise to deploy large numbers of troops if cities and states don't act to contain violence from protests over police brutality. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. The S&P 500 is up 0.25% now, up 7. The Dow's up 0.6%, up 162, and the Nasdaq is currently down 0.4%, down 37. The 10-year is down 4/32 with the yield of 0.67%. West Texas Intermediate crude is up 1.9% at $36.13 a barrel, with COMEX gold up just about 0.1% at $17.5170 an ounce. The dollar yen is at 108.56. The euro $1.1183, and the pound $1.2560. Jefferies Financial, stung by the poaching of an entire investment banking team by Cantor Fitzgerald, has accused the brokerage of making a concerted effort to stop the ex-employees from repaying bonuses it says are due. Jefferies is embroiled in the legal fight with rival Cantor that stretches from New York to Hong Kong after 26 of its bankers joined the brokerage in late 2017. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets continues now with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Greg Jarrett, thank you so much for that. We appreciate it. Again, NASDAQ trading down while the Dow and the S&P are up slightly, so a little bit of a mixed market there. Let's get a sense of what's happening in the world of small and mid-cap stocks. We welcome Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson. Dave, what are you looking at this morning?
Well, Paul, smaller companies doing a bit better than larger ones at the moment. The Russell 2000 index is up 0.4%, and the S&P 500 is higher by 0.2%. Now, Greg Jarrett mentioned what's going on with the gun makers, and in fact, one of the best performers in the Russell is gun maker Smith & Wesson Brands. The ticker there is SWBI. It's up more than 14%. You've got Sturm Ruger, ticker RGR, up 7.2%, and ammunition maker Vista Outdoor, ticker VSTO, up 11%. RH, whose name is its ticker symbol, has risen about 10.5%. The owner of home furnishing seller Restoration Hardware reaffirmed a forecast for higher operating profit margins this fiscal year and beyond. Now, the Russell's steepest drop belongs to Aduro Biotech, ticker ADRO. The drug developer has fallen about 19.5% after agreeing to merge with closely held Chinook Therapeutics in an all-stock deal initially valued at $272 million. And Seadrill, ticker SDRL, has slipped about 17.5% to 38 cents a share. Norwegian billionaire John Fredriksen's drilling rig company plans a second debt restructuring since 2018. Seadrill had a first quarter loss of $1.56 billion and said it will give up a listing on the New York Stock Exchange.
Dave Wilson, Bloomberg Stocks editor, thank you so much for being with us. Sometimes there are no words, and there has been a period of time over the past week or so in the United States that have been devastating for a lot of people. A lot of bad actors, a lot of good actors, a lot of neutral actors, but leaving a lot of America's cities in fires and tatters and looted and rioted. And Kevin Cirilli joining us now, Chief Washington Correspondent for Bloomberg News, Bloomberg Television, and Bloomberg Radio, also the host of Bloomberg Sound On. I'm trying to understand, Kevin, what the tone is in Washington, D.C. this morning.
Well, just anecdotally, I'm outside right now, sitting outside of where I live, and the helicopters are continuing. There's been one helicopter that has, and I apologize, but I think it really does show.
It's authentic.
And illustrates sort of mood in the city. It's an incredibly eerily quiet town this morning as we await for President Trump to address the country. We're told that he is going to continue to have a tone that invokes there to be more law and order. I'm told by Republican strategists, quite frankly, that they're mixed and divided in terms of how the president has responded to this. You've seen increasingly lawmakers in Congress and the Republican side voice out that they would like to see there to be more of a calming tone and action in terms of policy coming from the White House. Now, I would note this. If you look at it from a political lens, the president continues to have about a 40% approval rating, but his disapproval rating has slowly been increasing above 50%. Now, if you look historically at other presidents who have had those margins, typically they've had a lot of difficulty in terms of getting a second term. Now, also today, we're going to hear from former Vice President Joe Biden. He will be making a racial address in Philadelphia. Remember, that is the site of his campaign headquarters, but also the site where Barack Obama gave a historic race address as well. From a policy standpoint, this is the last point I'll make, and I apologize for being long-winded. From a policy standpoint, based upon my reporting, what I can tell you is that all of the chatter about there being a next round of economic stimulus, now it likely will be that there be some type of criminal justice reform or civil rights reform language in that particular bill. And there's been frustration on the left as well with leadership and Speaker Pelosi in terms of trying to organize some type of policy proposal to get things moving ahead.
Kevin, how about just optics? The optics for the president in terms of his presence during all of this civil unrest. There was over the weekend, the darkened White House, the reports that President Trump went to the secure bunker at one point Friday evening. Comparing that with yesterday, where there's a very visible walk across Lafayette Park to the church. Talk to us about the optics that the administration's trying to manage here.
I think it is such an illustration of our politically polarized times because, listen, I'm going to cut to the chase here, and I'll speak incredibly frankly, that for so many Americans, the images yesterday were horrifying as well as terrifying. But for just as many Americans, they were not. They were a symbol of faith, and they were also a symbol of law and order. And so it is indicative of the times that we find ourselves in this particular moment. I think, Lisa, you and I have spoken about this before earlier this morning, but this need for there to be some type of leadership coming from both sides of a unifying force, I think that really is what people are craving right now. And in terms of a policy prescription, I think, again, it almost puts even more impetus on there to be some type of proposal to make its way through. And the bottom line here is that you look at this. I don't want to conflate stories by any means. What happened in Minnesota, and when I spoke with the senator from Minnesota yesterday, she had, indicated that there does appear to be an organized element to some of these bad actors who have been participating in the riots and the looting, and that's going to be coming from Democrats. Susan Rice has alluded to such. But at the end of the day, faced with the most grappling economic disparity that this country has seen since the Depression, coupled with this racial unrest, something has to come from Congress in terms of a structural change.
Kevin Cirilli, thank you so much. We really appreciate that. We can hear again the helicopters overhead. So just giving, real, I think, context to what is happening in the nation's capital. Kevin Cirilli, Chief Washington Correspondent, Bloomberg Radio and Television. He's also the host of Bloomberg Sound On Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, D.C. That airs at 5 p.m. Wall Street time. So if you're in D.C., listen to that. Kevin always has great guests. So just really compelling reporting there, Lisa, from Kevin from the nation's capital.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a coincidence that the pandemic is coming alongside the social unrest. The idea that we're going to be getting the unemployment report for the month of May on Friday that may show an unemployment rate of 20%, with a much higher unemployment rate for those who are of lower income, as well as people who are Black and Hispanic.
Yes, absolutely. We will certainly have all of that for you Friday when the jobs numbers come out, the unemployment and so on. We will have that at Bloomberg. Right now, let's head down to Washington, D.C. for world and national headlines. Let's go to Nathan Hager. Nathan, what do you have for us?
Well, Paul, Joe Biden is offering his first public reaction to the unrest that has broken out in the wake of George Floyd's death. At a major speech at Philadelphia City Hall, the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee said Floyd's last words, "I can't breathe," are echoing across the country.
They speak to a nation where too often just the color of your skin puts your life at risk. They speak to a nation where more than 100,000 people have lost their lives to the virus and 40 million have filed for unemployment, with a disproportionate number of those deaths and job losses concentrated in Black and brown communities.
And Biden says President Trump is fanning the flames of hate by threatening a military response to protests. He says Congress shouldn't wait until after the November election to act on police reform. The Pentagon says it has increased force protection at military bases outside Washington, and another 1,500 Guard troops are expected on duty in D.C. today. Democratic Congressman Adam Smith is calling for Defense Secretary Mark Esper and Joint Chiefs Chairman Mark Milley to testify before his committee about the domestic military role in damping down the protests. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio says his city's curfews will remain in effect for the rest of the week. CNN reports about 700 people were arrested after a night of looting and vandalism hardest hit Macy's flagship store in Midtown. De Blasio says he is still aiming for the city to reopen from the coronavirus on June 8th. Global news, 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
You've always relied on Bloomberg's strong Asian presence.
You didn't mention any particular areas in China. Let me just go to Hong Kong.
And now you need it even more.
Where are we in terms of understanding President Xi?
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
We're starting to see infections in some of the Asian countries.
Tonight at 6 Eastern.
Do you ever get the feeling some people just weren't prepared?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
1 in 3 adults has prediabetes. 1 in 3. That means it could be you, your football buddy, your football buddy, or you, your best man, your worst man, you, your dog walker, your cat jogger. While 1 in 3 adults has prediabetes, with early diagnosis, prediabetes can be reversed. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and its Prediabetes Awareness Partners.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Listen, as a hiring manager, I've got to tell you, the best job candidate isn't always the typical candidate. Sometimes they're a grad of life.
Meet the grads of life. Young adults of unique determination and experience. An ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
Sometimes the best candidates aren't the ones you're used to.
Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
At Bloomberg, we know a lot of...
The IBM Flash storage solution can be broken down into 3 S's. Speed. Retrieve data fast. Scalability. Grow your storage as your business grows. Simplicity. Easily migrate and integrate with existing systems. Oh, and there's a 4th. It's surprisingly affordable, with a recommended monthly price of £200 for 26 terabytes. Order by the 30th of June and pay nothing for 90 days. Visit ibm.biz/flash offer now.
This is an important update from the government about coronavirus. We all need to stay alert so we can control the virus and reduce the risk of infection. Staying alert means you must stay at home as much as possible. Work from home if you can. Limit contact with others. Keep your distance if you go out. And wash your hands regularly. Do not leave home if you or anyone in your household has symptoms. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Whoa, just got a Moonpig reminder that it's your birthday Saturday.
Yeah, I set that up.
Oh, do you know what? I forget one time. Okay, I'm in the app.
Oh, the romantic card section.
I'm full of surprises. Now, what rhymes with babe?
How about just uploading a nice pic? No, wait, I'm not ready.
Hey, I love you from every angle. Now for the gifts. Oh, and flowers.
Heartfelt can happen anywhere with moonpig.com. Download the app now.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunnin to Fiala, he scores!
And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
With millions of podcasts dropping new episodes all the time, how do you keep up with all your favorites? TuneIn makes it easy. Simply head to the home screen and find your new episode section to see the latest additions.
Ready for a one-of-a-kind look at the NFL? On the PFF NFL podcast, Steve Palazzolo and Sam Munson interpret the unique stats of Pro Football Focus to analyze the league, uncover secret superstars, and discuss which teams to watch out for in the next Super Bowl.
Let's talk some football. Let's do it, Steve. All sorts of stuff. We're going to do most improved defenses around the NFL. Solomon Wilcots, our very own. He went into some detail over at PFF.com. Most improved defenses around the
Search PFF NFL on TuneIn to listen.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Pulls over a man into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There's going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
10, pass to the 5, touchdown!
Search Classic Game Replays to listen for free.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
While he was gone, Al had some kind of vote to make him the managing. You remember he used to come up all the time in the Raiders game that he was the managing general partner. By the way, don't forget, there was a lot going on in Munich. You know how tired that man was to come back and find out that Al Davis had strong-armed his team from him while he was gone?
Search The Right Time with Bomani Jones to listen.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
At Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks are mixed now as a drop in tech stocks blunted gains for banks. The dollar's down for a 4th straight day. We check the numbers every 15 minutes. S&P 500 is now little changed. The Dow is up 0.4%, up 101, and the NASDAQ is down 0.7%, down 62. A 10-year is down 2/32. The yield 0.66%. West Texas Intermediate crude is still in the green, up 1.9% at $36.11 a barrel, while COMEX gold's down 0.1% at $17.48 even per ounce. The dollar yen, 108.54. The euro, $1.1186. The British pound, $1.2542. Almost a third of unemployment benefits estimated to be owed to the millions of Americans who lost their job as a result of the coronavirus slump have yet to be paid as flagship policies struggle to cope with the unprecedented wave of layoffs. Now that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Earlier today, we were talking with our good friend Max Neeson from Bloomberg Opinion about treatments for the COVID-19. And one of those treatments that Max was talking about was using blood plasma from recovered COVID-19 patients because that plasma contains vital antibodies that have fought off the disease and could now help others do the same. We want to dig into that more deeply, and for that, we're fortunate to welcome Julie Kim, President of Plasma-Derived Therapies Business Unit at Takeda, also a co-leader of the COVID-19 Plasma Alliance based in Zurich. Julie, thanks so much for joining us here. If you could just start us off and give us kind of the ABCs of what blood plasma taken from recovered patients, what that really means for others.
Sure. Thanks, Paul. The blood plasma that exists in recovered patients can be used to treat people in two different ways. One, you can directly transfuse it, or two, you can use it to make a medicine called a hyperimmune. And both are potential options for treating individuals who are suffering from COVID-19.
How effective are these at completely stopping the virus?
Well, we won't know until the clinical studies are completely done, but there is past experience with hyperimmunes and convalescent plasma in the treatment of prior pandemics, going as far back as the Spanish flu in the early 1900s. So there's solid scientific rationale for why these two approaches would work.
So give us a sense, Julie, of kind of where we are in the whole process here in the United States for trying to get this process moving and scale it, I guess, is kind of the key issue.
Sure. Well, with convalescent plasma, we've launched a campaign called The Fight Is In Us. And you can go to the website, thefightisisus.org, to understand more about what convalescent plasma can do and if you are eligible to donate, as well as finding a donation center nearest to you.
So if this is effective, and it's been proven effective in the past, why isn't this acting as a circuit breaker to the virus or to the fear of it? In other words, that if people get it, there is a remedy that has been shown to be effective.
Well, Lisa, part of it is that the clinical studies have not been completed yet. So for the convalescent plasma for direct transfusion, there are ongoing studies. And for the hyperimmune, the clinical study should begin in July. So until we have the definitive proof from those clinical studies, we can't say that there's an approved treatment for COVID-19 using convalescent plasma. But there's good evidence to date.
Julie Kim, President of Plasma-Derived Therapies. Now, I just wanted to follow up real quick because there's sort of this contrast right now with this idea that you want to get a cure, and yet as a company, you have to also make money. How do you toggle between that, given the backdrop of the pandemic?
Well, this is why we formed the Plasma Alliance to begin with about 2 months ago. From our perspective as a company, we felt that using our core capabilities and pooling our resources together, we could have a potential solution for COVID-19 faster than if we did this alone as individual companies. So we have set aside our individual interests in the interest of public health to bring forth a potential medicine to treat COVID-19.
So, Julie, give us a sense of timing here. I mean, it's a lot of things we tend to ask folks like yourself, kind of just timing. You know, we're all kind of thinking about vaccines and treatments and when's it going to be available and when can we get back to normal here. So for some of this plasma treatments, what's you think a realistic time to maybe get it to scale in the U.S.?
So for the direct transfusion approach, you can access that today. So under emergency use authorization, physicians can treat individuals with convalescent plasma directly transfused. For the hyperimmune, we intend to start the clinical study in July. So until we finish the clinical study, the hyperimmune would not be available.
Julie
Kim, thank you so much for joining us. Julie Kim, was really some interesting aspects, Lisa, as we think about the treatment of this pandemic and the treatment of the disease. It's nice to have people like Julie Kim, who's president of Plasma-Derived Therapies Business Unit at Takeda, also the co-leader of the COVID-19 Plasma Alliance, join us because there's so many things to keep keep in front of us as it relates to the different therapies, the different vaccines that people are working on.
Yeah, I'm struggling to understand where we are in this pandemic, as I think a lot of people are, especially given some of the advancements that we're getting, but still in trial phase, both on the remedy side as well as the vaccine. And then what we're seeing with people who are sick of staying home. on every level. And we're seeing that, and people are spending more, which is really positive for the economy. And as part of what's been backstopping this market is that you are seeing anecdotal data increasingly showing that the economy is getting back online. And yet the protests, the unrest, how much will this lead to another wave? How much will this lead to further threats to the big cities? And I do want to just say something. I was looking up a statistic. The biggest 25 metropolitan regions in the United States account for half of the United States' gross domestic product each year. Yep. So there is a question of the economic recovery, how robust it can be if you have ongoing unrest in the major cities. I haven't heard a lot of analysis about that, Paul.
No, I haven't. And I think, we're relatively early days, all those 7 days into this. And, I think that we're trying to get a sense of local municipalities and state governors are trying to deal with this, looking for some direction from the federal government, not getting it really as of yet. Maybe we'll get something today from President Trump. But it's really been left up to the mayors across the country and to a lesser extent the governors really trying to get a handle on that. And no place is that more pronounced than in New York City. And I know you have a frontline view of that. So very difficult across many communities across this country, but just kind of laying in another layer of uncertainty for investors.
Yeah, I overheard the homeschooling lesson today with the teacher saying to the kids, adults sometimes don't have the answers, but you need to take charge of your education at least going forward. From New York, this is Bloomberg Markets.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. The S&P 500 has pulled back and now trading little changed, with staggering unrest happening throughout the nation and brewing geopolitical tensions, especially with China. Earnings for North American coal miners may plunge by more than half this year as the pandemic makes a weak market even worse. Moody's Investor Service said earnings will slide by more than 50% in 2020. The makers of Activision Blizzard's popular Call of Duty video game is holding off on new content. The company said in a Twitter post that now is not the time in the wake of the violent protests all across the U.S. And to restart Hollywood productions while protecting against the coronavirus, studios and unions are recommending that scripts be changed to minimize touching and that filmmakers use computer-generated images to replace real-life interactions on the screen. Closing of theaters has cost the industry about $1 billion a month in domestic sales. Courtney Dunhope, Bloomberg Radio.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
COVID-19. Can the world reopen for business?
Give us a sense of how you're ramping up and taking care of folks on the ground.
What's the long-term impact?
Why will we not see a V-shaped recovery?
When will there be a cure or a vaccine?
How can you model that at a time when it's unclear whether we're going to see a resurgence in viruses?
The answer is will emerge.
Can you give us a sense of timing?
And you'll find them here. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. In-depth analysis.
The IBM Flash storage solution can be broken down into 3 S's. Speed. Retrieve data fast. Scalability. Grow your storage as your business grows. Simplicity. Easily migrate and integrate with existing systems. Oh, and there's a 4th. It's surprisingly affordable, with a recommended monthly price of £200 for 26 terabytes. Order by the 30th of June and pay nothing for 90 days. Visit ibm.biz/flash offer now.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. save lives.
Get your cook on with Asda. With Uncle Ben's rice, 250 grams for just £1. And our Butcher's Selection chicken breast fillets, only £3.40 for 650 grams. Why not whack it in the wok? At Asda, we're committed to low prices every day on the quality products you need. Asda. Selected stores and lines subject to availability.
At Lloyds Bank, we know that money is a concern for a lot of people during this time.
I'm really worried about the business. I'm worrying about you. And I think that's changing me. And I'm worried that somewhere along the line you might not love me anymore.
Oh, that's not true. Whatever's playing on your mind at the moment, Lloyds Bank, in partnership with Mental Health UK, can offer you support and advice. Visit lloydsbank.com/mentalhealth.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
Yeah, but it's unique times. I think there's unique circumstances, and we're trying to...
To standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
Hi, this is Mike Tirico, introducing you to Sports Uncovered, the newest podcast series from the storytellers at NBC Sports that will shine a fresh light on the most unforgettable moments in sport.
The reason why I'm smiling, I might get in trouble for this.
Search Sports Uncovered to start listening today.
Did you know that with TuneIn's local radio feature, you can stream live FM and AM stations broadcasting in your area? Discover local news, talk, and music stations. Navigate to the local radio section under Browse to listen locally on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up, we're going to speak with Meltem Demir's Chief Strategy Officer at CoinShares on all things crypto and Bitcoin. Plus, John Struer, CEO of Calvert Research Management, on why he believes ending racism in America is a responsibility of corporations. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
S&P's come off the mountain, Paul. It's now trading little changed as financial shares gained along with materials and energy companies, while losses for Amazon.com and Apple helped send the NASDAQ lower. Gun makers are extending their rally. Sturm Ruger rose 7.6%, the most in one day as its sector advanced on current news. Trading in the company's call options is triple the average. Trading volume 5 times the average for this time of day. Right now, Ruger's up 5.7%. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P is up 0.1%, up 4. The Dow's up 0.5%, up 132. And the NASDAQ is down 0.5%, down 45. The 10-year is down 3/32, the yield 0.67%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is up 2.6% at $36.38 a barrel, while COMEX gold is down 0.5% at $17.4210 per ounce. The dollar yen, 108.56. The euro, $1.1175, and the British pound, $1.2539. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Amid everything that's been going on, Paul, we have not discussed one area of the market that was super hot a couple of years ago, and that is the crypto asset sector. And it has actually been on fire with Bitcoin rallying above $10,000 once again, and it has gained 40% more than that so far this year. Let's talk about digital gold with Meltem Demir's Chief Strategy Officer with CoinShares Group, which has about $750 million in the digital space. Joining us from London. Meltem, thank you so much for being with us. Can you talk about Bitcoin and its use, or just the crypto asset sector in general, its use as digital gold right now?
Absolutely, and thanks for having me on. So it's really interesting to be living in this time right now. Bitcoin was a product of the last financial crisis. As some of us who've been in the space for a while may know, the Bitcoin white paper was written in 2009 and the network launched in 2010. We're now 11 years into sort of the Bitcoin story, and we're seeing Bitcoin really come of age and mature in this financial crisis we're going through right now, particularly as we've seen over the last 3 months, a lot of risk, a lot of uncertainty, and investors really starting to look at the investing landscape and reevaluating how they want to be allocated going into the next year and beyond. So the investment community obviously still has a lot of mixed views on Bitcoin. Some investment firms and investment managers have made big strides into the sector and are offering products and services to their clients. We're one example. We come from the commodity space as a team, but have been in the digital asset space for the last 7 years now. Other firms, most notably Goldman's wealth management team, have been less than hot on crypto assets. But one thing is sure, every investor is talking about Bitcoin, getting smart on crypto assets, and starting to develop a perspective and really trying to figure out where Bitcoin might fit into their portfolio going forward. So it's an exciting time. It's been a really wild time, and we're really excited about the intelligent conversation we see developing around Bitcoin, digital assets, and this technology more broadly.
So, Meltem, you mentioned the Goldman report. I remember when that came out, it caused some waves here. Summarize what Goldman was saying there and whether if you agree or disagree with them.
Absolutely. So it's important to know the report was issued by one of Goldman's chief investment officers, who has been an analyst of a lot of different trends in the investing space. And I think it was an interesting summary because it really used what's happening in macro markets, what's happening in gold, as a way to frame why they felt Bitcoin was not a great investment, not a great long-term value investment for investors. The way they described Bitcoin, which I think was an interesting characterization, they talked a lot about issues pertaining to money laundering. And as we know, Goldman has itself been dealing with a number of issues related to money laundering following the fallout of the 1MDB scandal. And the other aspect that was interesting is in this report, they not only mentioned that they felt Bitcoin was really just purely speculative and not really fundamental value investment, they also made a similar assessment of gold, where they stated they did not feel that gold was a significant investment opportunity for investors. And as we look at what's happened to both the price of gold and the price of Bitcoin, I think here is an interesting instance where the market certainly is indicating it's not in agreement with that particular assessment. But
Meltem, though, to be fair, though, I think they're not alone in saying that, right? They're especially, I mean, I don't leave gold aside, but when it comes to crypto assets, Goldman Sachs certainly has plenty of company in saying it's a speculative asset, considering the fact that people are not using it the way that they would another currency. What's the counter argument to why this has staying power in a way that goes beyond what some people are saying?
Sure. I think there have been a lot of great rebuttals written by the industry that use a great set of data. I think there's a lot of evidence to the contrary, and we at CoinShares spend a lot of time surfacing that data and sharing it with our investors, our clients in the market. But I think there are a few key trends here. Bitcoin is being used, and the way it's being used by people is being used as a hedge against inflation and as a long-term store of value. There are more people than ever that hold Bitcoin in their investment accounts, whether that's through a structured product like our XBT provider product or the Grayscale GBTC product here in the U.S. There are a lot of Bitcoin wallets that have been created, and that number continues to increase. The Bitcoin that's held in those wallets is staying dormant, meaning people aren't speculating on it, but they're really holding it. And then most importantly, we've seen just a tremendous number of inflows into Bitcoin over the last 2 months alone. One interesting fact, over the last 2 months, the demand for Bitcoin has outpaced its supply. So as you know, Bitcoin has a daily production of new Bitcoins through an activity called mining. And in the last 2 months alone, the amount of investor demand for Bitcoin through things like Square's Cash App, Grayscale's GBTC product, and our XPT provider product, which is an exchange-traded product, there has been 150% demand for Bitcoin that exceeds the supply being produced, which to me, again, is a very bullish indicator. We're also seeing investors on the trading side taking a lot of interest. The CME Bitcoin futures contract broke all-time highs in the last month in terms of outstanding open interest on the platform. And at the end of May, we saw one day where we had over $1 billion of traded volume, which is an all-time high for that particular product.
Meltem, thank you so much for joining us. Meltem Demirs, she's a chief strategy officer for CoinShares Group with $750 million in the digital space based in London, giving us the latest on Bitcoin, which is rallying, as Lisa mentioned earlier, and all things in the crypto space, trying to get greater credibility in financial markets. It looks like they're having some success looking at the price of Bitcoin. Right now, let's head down to our Washington, D.C. studios to Nathan Hager for World and National Headlines. Nathan, what do you have for us?
Well, Paul, Joe Biden is blasting President Trump's hardline response to the unrest across the country over the police custody death of George Floyd. The presumptive Democratic presidential nominee has given his first major speech in months at Philadelphia City Hall.
The country is crying out for leadership. Leadership that can unite us. Leadership that brings us together. Leadership that can recognize pain and deep grief of communities that have had a knee on their neck for a long time.
Biden is calling on Congress not to wait until the November elections to act on police reforms, including a ban on chokeholds like the one that killed Eric Garner in Staten Island 6 years ago. President Trump continues to face criticism for deploying tear gas and flash bombs to clear protesters before holding that photo op outside the historic St. John's Church near the White House. House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer says his fellow Democrats will discuss the incident later today. He says it's worthy of censure. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison is promising to hold all those responsible for Floyd's death accountable, but he says he will not rush the case against the 4 officers involved.
These cases are not easy, and anybody who says they are has never done one. So we're working quickly, and we're making sure that every link in the prosecutorial chain will be tight.
Ellison spoke with ABC News. President Trump reportedly plans to meet with senior advisors this week to discuss policy options for the next coronavirus relief package. That's what a senior administration official is telling the Wall Street Journal, though he says the timing of the meeting could change with the White House focused on unrest right now. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nathan Hager. This is Bloomberg.
For the Jewish Communal Fund, Noel Spiegel, former senior partner with Deloitte & Touche and past JCF president, discusses the advantages of a donor-advised fund over a private foundation.
There's a lot involved in having a private foundation. You need to engage attorneys, you need to engage accountants, file tax returns. At JCF, all of that is done for you. You don't have to get involved in anything other than making your contribution to your fund and then determining which grants that you want to make.
A JCF fund may be opened with a minimum $5,000 contribution of cash or appreciated securities and can be used as an alternative to or together with a private foundation.
If you have a foundation, you have to list all of the contributions that you made. Potentially anybody, because the information is public, can find out exactly which organizations a foundation has made charitable contributions to.
Let JCF simplify your philanthropy and protect your privacy. Learn more about JCF's private client group at jcfny.org.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit visit HUD.gov/fair housing. That's HUD.gov/fair housing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
COVID-19. On days when...
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
This is an important update from the government about coronavirus. We all need to stay alert so we can control the virus and reduce the risk of infection. Staying alert means you must stay at home as much as possible. Work from home if you can. Limit contact with others. Keep your distance if you go out. And wash your hands regularly. Do not leave home if you or anyone in your household has symptoms. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Get your cook on with Asda. With Uncle Ben's rice, 250 grams for just £1. And our Butcher's Selection chicken breast fillets, only £3.40 for 650 grams. Why not whack it in the wok? At Asda, we're committed to low prices every day on the quality products you need. Asda. Selected stores and lines subject to availability.
Ready to talk brass tacks on what's happening in Major League Baseball? Turn to the Effectively Wild podcast from Fangraphs for daily statistics, analysis, and commentary.
One team will say, yeah, we're going to keep paying minor leaguers their stipend, and another team will say, we're going to extend the stipend through this month, and then another team will say, nope, we're cutting them off. So are extending it at least through August, which would basically be the end of the minor league regular season.
Search Effectively Wild on TuneIn to listen.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic Game Replays to start listening.
Looking to freshen up your listening on TuneIn? Head to the homepage to discover something new. There you'll see custom recommendations based on your listening habits, along with new episodes of shows you've enjoyed in the past. Uncover your next audio obsession on the homepage.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
He does! Fabry wins it!
To standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
Ready for a one-of-a-kind look at the NFL? On the PFF NFL podcast, Steve Palazzolo and Sam Munson interpret the unique stats of Pro Football Focus to analyze the league, uncover secret superstars, and discuss which teams to watch out for in the next Super Bowl.
Let's talk some football. Let's do it, Steve. All sorts of stuff. We're going to do most improved defenses around the NFL. Solomon Wilcots, our very own. He went into some detail over at PFF.com. Most improved defenses around the
Search PFF NFL on TuneIn to listen.
Are you ready for the realest first-hand take of what's happening in the NBA? On their podcast, All the Smoke, former NBA players Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson bring their fiery intensity to the mic, dishing on the latest news and drama from on and off the court without boundaries.
Half man, half amazing. My friend, our brother, Vince Carter, man, welcome to the show.
Yo, what's up, man?
What's up, my brother?
Man,
Search All the Smoke on TuneIn to listen.
News 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks waver a bit as investors face a protracted economic recovery following the coronavirus lockdowns, outbreaks of violence across American cities, and tensions with China. Now we check the markets every 15 minutes for the trading day. S&P 500's up 0.25%, now up 7. Dow's up 0.6%, up 146, and the Nasdaq is down 0.3%, down 30. The 10-year's down 3/32 with a yield of 0.66%. The West Texas Intermediate crude's up 2.2% at 36.22 a barrel, with COMEX gold down 0.5% at 1742.40. Let's take a look at the yen. The dollar yen is at 108.60. The euro $1.1175. The British pound $1.2534. HBO Network earned a reputation for adult dramas filled with sex and violence, including The Sopranos, Game of Thrones, and Sex and the City. But when its new streaming offshoot launched last week, the buzziest shows were aimed at children. Oh, yeah. Looney Tunes cartoons, a new take on classic characters Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, was the most in-demand show when the new HBO Max service debuted on May 27th. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Bloomberg Markets is brought to you by Witham, a forward-thinking advisory and accounting firm helping clients to be in a position of strength in the new reality of business. Learn about their innovative solutions by visiting Witham.com. And we have been wondering about the disparities that we have been seeing in the job market with some of the job losses in the wake of the coronavirus hammering the Black and Latino communities disproportionately. This just has come to the fore as the unrest in America's cities gets harder and harder to combat. Joining us right now is John Stroyer, Chief Executive Officer of Calvert Research and Management. I want to know, from your perspective, you say that ending racism is the responsibility of corporations. Why do you say that?
Thanks for having me on. And certainly we've given corporations a significant amount of power in the United States. They inform innumerable social and environmental outcomes. So as a result of having that power, which has been something they've acquired over time, they have a responsibility to help solve these types of issues. Additionally, their ability to take action and to drive positive social change is a significant driver for their brand value and their attractiveness and reputation as a provider of products and services, as also as an employer. So they have that responsibility, they've taken it, and they've got to take action to help solve this.
John, how about the counter-argument that the responsibility of a company is to maximize shareholder profits?
Well, I think there's a tie-in here because, society that is destabilized as a result of civil unrest, which is an outcome of excessive inequality, GDP is suboptimal. So I do think that companies working to solve this problem will be able to see a benefit to long-term value creation. I don't really think there's a conflict here.
Although markets may disagree, and I'm thinking of Facebook and Twitter in particular, not necessarily on the racism question, but certainly on interfering and sort of making a judgment call when it comes to how people are using their platforms. Facebook erred on the side of not really interfering, and Twitter has slapped a number of labels with warnings on it for a number of different leaders recently, including President Trump. How can this not necessarily be what we're looking at longer term in terms of the benefit and detractions and interfering? Because right now it seems like Facebook has won and Twitter has lost.
Well, certainly in the short term, anything can happen with security prices. What we think about is long-term value creation and what happens over a slightly longer time period. And I think it also extends well beyond social media. To companies that are doing business in every community. And I'm not sure that Twitter has won or lost or Facebook has won or lost. It's way too soon to tell.
So, John, this discussion, your argument per se, seems to fit into the ESG kind of discussion, environmental, social, and governance, that a lot more investors are paying attention to in their securities analysis. How do you think this fits into kind of ESG and overall analysis?
Well, companies today are all striving to prove their capabilities on diversity and inclusion, whether that's to ESG investors or whether that's to the workplace of today and the future. So this is a square-on ESG issue, and investors and asset owners really expect companies to provide the necessary information so we know how they're really doing. And let me relate this to financial returns. Today, the demographics of the country have really shifted and changed. We have a much larger black population, a much larger Hispanic population, and educational attainment across the board in minority groups is going up. So we want companies to be able to draw from a broad labor pool. We want companies to be able to achieve the benefits of diversity and inclusion. From an ESG investor's perspective, though, we need data from companies to really assess how they're doing. And for companies to be able to be attractive workplaces for blacks, for Hispanics, for Asians, for all people of color, and for everybody, they have to do a good job helping to actually use their voice and solve these larger social issues. So it's a square-on ESG issue. By the way, I think the ESG investing community needs to do a lot more to push companies to help solve these problems and provide us the data that we need to know what outcomes they're really achieving through these diversity and inclusion programs.
John, your position atop Calvert Research and Management, which was acquired by Eaton Vance and oversees nearly $20 billion with this focus on ESG, is admirable. And I would love to see some of the things that you're talking about come to fruition. What are you looking for with respect to corporations, steps that are meaningful toward ending racism? What can they actually do?
Well, racism is tied up with inequality. And inequality in this country is deeply embedded and starts with inequality of opportunity at every level. So there are a number of things that companies are responsible for doing. As I said, a first thing is disclosure, providing us the real information about the demographics of their workplace, who has what jobs, so that we know how well the company is doing there. Next, creating attractive training and development programs for people of color and for people who have not had those opportunities in the educational system is critical. Being able to develop talent across the board is essential. I think also working with the educational system in the communities where these companies draw from and helping to create equal opportunity in the educational system is also critical. And if you think about it, companies in America need to have a well-educated workforce across every demographic. So there are a number of things that companies need to do in order to sort of secure their place in the labor market and to help improve the workforce.
Right.
So it isn't just what they should do, it's what they need to do.
Hey, John, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate that. John Stroyer, CEO of Calvert Research and Management with about $19 billion in assets under management based in Bethesda, talking about kind of racism and the role that corporations have, Lisa. And it kind of goes back to that ESG discussion as we think about companies holistically and their impact on their environment.
It also goes to some of the comments that we've heard out of the chief executives from everyone from Citigroup to JP Morgan to BlackRock in response to the protests, really coming out in solidarity with the cause, certainly not the violence, but the cause.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're looking at the markets. Markets kind of mixed today. We'll have more for you for the remainder of the day. Stay with Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg.
In addition to Bloomberg Radio, you can catch the latest news and biggest newsmakers on Bloomberg Television. Look for us on DirecTV Channel 353 or check your local listings. Interconnect here.
This is an important update from the government about coronavirus. We all need to stay alert so we can control the virus and reduce the risk of infection. Staying alert means you must stay at home as much as possible. Work from home if you can. Limit contact with others. Keep your distance if you go out. And wash your hands regularly. Do not leave home if you or anyone in your household has symptoms. Stay alert. Control the virus. save lives.
Looking for your daily fix of NFL news and analysis?
In that. So we had to blow it up at the Super Bowl predictions instead.
Look no further than the Pick Six podcast, where CBS sports writer Will Brinson gets you up to speed with what's trending in the NFL that day, so that you're always in the know.
Yeah, it's pretty revealing of Brinson's methodology for predictions. When he gets mad at people for predicting good teams are going to win the Super Bowl or good players are going to win major awards. That's how you wind up.
Search Pick Six on TuneIn to listen.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Are you ready for the realest first-hand take of what's happening in the NBA? On their podcast, All the Smoke, former NBA players Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson bring their fiery intensity to the mic, dishing on the latest news and drama from on and off the court without boundaries.
Half man, half amazing. My friend, our brother, Vince Carter, man. Welcome to the show.
Yo, what's up, man?
What's up, my brother? Man,
Search All the Smoke on TuneIn to listen.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. The best sports story all day, 20 minutes a day, 5 days a week. ESPN Daily.
Search ESPN Daily to listen.
Today at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From New York to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power, where the world of politics meets the world of business. I'm David Weston. We start with the markets once again today, and Abigail Doolittle is here. And I have to say, Abigail, when I woke up this morning and saw all that civil unrest and clearing right here in New York City, I thought the markets would really take a hit, but they haven't.
I think you're not alone in that view, that it's a little bit puzzling, a head scratcher here, the idea that we have stocks higher, mixed at this point, but earlier up a little bit more, despite the fact that we do have all of this civil unrest, and especially close to home, right here in New York. I can tell you from my own personal experience, walking around, many stores are boarded up. Bloomingdale's right across the street, going up. That's the case. And you also have to wonder, David, in terms of the reopening here for the city, it's on track for next Monday. However, you have some of these businesses boarding up. There was one business, in fact, that had been boarded up during the virus. It's taken its boards off. Maybe they go down now or they go back up. So it's just when you take all of this into account, it's hard to believe that this is not hitting the economy. But the fact that you have stocks holding in there tells you that some traders believe that right now this civil unrest is unlikely to hit the corporate profit outlook that we're always talking about. However, if there is an unfortunate spike in COVID-19 a few weeks from now because of the proximity of protesters and what's going on, that could be a different story. The other big driver on the day, though, holding stocks, right around flat, small gains. The fact that we have the financials that move into the cyclical sectors once again happening as technology, the stay-at-home sector, trades off a little bit. What's really amazing, the 10-year yield, it had been down just a little bit earlier, David, higher right now, about flat. But that tells you bonds, those are flat too. So investors really aren't worried about this fundamental picture that we're seeing here, the social unrest that you're talking about. Let's see whether or not that changes.
Abigail, pick up on something you mentioned to me just earlier, and that is the dollar. How much of this is a weakening dollar?
I think that probably all of this rally, or much of this rally, really is the dollar. That's a hallmark of QE, quantitative easing, the quote-unquote money printing, that Jay Powell spoke about not so long ago, so that when you weaken the dollar, it makes risk assets that are denominated in the dollar much cheaper, so to speak. This has been a trick that we've seen many times in the previous rounds of quantitative easing. When the dollar goes down, stocks go up. Commodities go up to a lesser degree. But I think that if you did not have this support from the Federal Reserve, simply on the monetary policy standpoint, putting aside the credit facilities and all the other stimulus that's out there, you probably would not have this rally for stocks. You would have investors looking more closely at these fundamentals. But it seems that markets, traders think the Fed still has their back, David.
That's what they have no reason to believe otherwise, given what the Fed has done and said. Thank you so much to Abigail Doolittle for that report on the markets. Well, as we've said, 2020 is really shaping up to be something of a year of crises, most recently with the civil unrest we talked about with Abigail. But before that, there was, of course, the pandemic and the economic downturn around the world. I talked earlier today with the SEC chairman. He is Jay Clayton. And I talked about what that was doing to the markets, what it was doing to the SEC, and most particularly, what it was doing to his enforcement efforts with respect to claims about the coronavirus.
The claims that look suspect or are clearly speculative or just on their face fraudulent, our enforcement team is out there. They're shutting down trading in companies that would do that. And we need to be. People are counting on us to look at those kind of claims, quickly assess whether they have any validity, and then, where appropriate, shut down trading so we can find out if tales of riches to come are in fact true. That's our job. I can't thank the women and men of the enforcement division enough for being vigilant in this area. I think the number of trading suspensions is into the 20s. I recently had a call with my international colleagues, and my international colleagues gave our enforcement division the gold star for quick action in identifying these types of scams and shutting them down. So, that's really kind of a frontline immediate job we have. In terms of disclosure and loans and that, look, what I've said to companies is be consistent across your community. If you're communicating with the marketplace, that communication ought to be consistent with whatever you're telling the government about your need for support. And by and large, I think companies are doing that, but it's important for good corporate hygiene, trust, that if you're telling the government you need money, you're telling your investors you need money.
What about some of the initiatives you were working on before the pandemic came up? Talk about like revisions to proxy rules. Do those continue apace, or do you have to put those to one side?
No, we have not put our policy-making agenda to the side. We are a very, when you talk about organizations being affected in different ways by the operational constraints of social distancing and the health and safety structures that we live by, we're a very lucky organization. We can operate fairly effectively in a remote capacity, and we've been doing so. And look, the women and men in those policy-making divisions, they're committed to improving our markets and modernizing our markets. I'm not going to put that on hold unless I have to.
And so, for example, the proxy rules, where do they stand now?
They're on our agenda to be finished in this fiscal year, and I expect to have them finished in this fiscal year. I'm so pleased with the rigor that our staff has applied to all the comments we've received, and I think we're on schedule to finish them during this fiscal year. That's September 10th. People don't know about the SEC fiscal year, so by the end of this period.
And how do you feel about bringing people back to work at the SEC? I think you said at least until July 15. Do you think that that's realistic?
Well, David, I do think it is realistic because we are able to function. I mean, every organization is different. And I'm not making choices for other organizations, but this organization functions very well in a virtual environment. There are a number of functions that we have that would improve with people on site. There are some functions where you do need people on site. Look, we live in a country where due process is important. And we have people who we're bringing actions against. And if they want the benefit of being interviewed face-to-face or being able to, in as virtual a face-to-face environment as possible, we need to provide that to them. We believe in due process. So those types of things we have to do. But by and large, we can operate very effectively remotely. And what I want to do is, as things get back to normal, and I hope they do, bring people back in those areas that are most acutely affected by remote working, and then go from there. Keeping health and safety, front of mind at all times. So I have the luxury of that, given the way we work. I know others don't, but that's how I'm looking at it here.
That was Jay Clayton. He's the chairman of the SEC. Coming up here, we're going to talk with Brian Brooks, the new acting comptroller of the currency, about the banks and the effect of these crises on the banks that he regulates. That's coming up on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Market upheavals.
The narrative is driven by
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
This is an important update from the government about coronavirus. We all need to stay alert so we can control the virus and reduce the risk of infection. Staying alert means you must stay at home as much as possible. Work from home if you can. Limit contact with others. Keep your distance if you go out. And wash your hands regularly. Do not leave home if you or anyone in your household has symptoms. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Sponsored by SEI. Imagine your asset management firm's operational infrastructure as a competitive advantage. Let SEI show you how at SEIC.com/IMS. Benchmarks are mixed as a drop in tech stocks, blunted gains for banks, automakers, and energy companies. The dollar's down for a fourth straight day. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. The S&P 500 is up 0.2%, up 6. The Dow is up 0.5%, up 132, and the Nasdaq is down 0.3%, down 32. The 10-year's down 3/32 with a yield of 0.66%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is up 2.3% at $36.24 a barrel, while COMEX gold's down 0.9% at $17.3540 an ounce. The dollar yen, 108.62. The euro, $1.1167. The pound, $1.2539. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett. Now more Balance of Power with David Weston right here on Bloomberg Radio.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. It is time now for Bloomberg First Word News. And for that, we go to Karina Mitchell. Karina?
David, thank you. Some Democratic governors aren't buying President Trump's threat to deploy the military to put down street violence. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker says he doesn't believe the president can send troops into his state. The president has told governors and mayors they need to dominate the streets. Joe Biden is slamming President Trump's response to days of nationwide protests, saying he's, quote, fanning the flames of hate. The presumptive Democratic nominee spoke at Philadelphia City Hall earlier today. He accused the president of being more interested in power than in principle. Biden also called on Congress not to wait for the November election to begin to address inequities in economic opportunity and criminal justice that disproportionately affect African Americans. Meanwhile, the European Union's top executive and British Prime Minister Boris Johnson will meet later this month for talks that could give new momentum to the stalled post-Brexit negotiations. Negotiators resumed a fourth round of talks today, but there's little hope they'll reach a breakthrough on a future trade deal. The UK left the EU on January 31st, but remains in a transition period until the end of the year. And Italy is urging citizens to gather to work to revive the country as it prepares to lift restrictions on domestic travel. With a number of new coronavirus cases continuing to decline there, Italians will be allowed to travel freely around the country again starting tomorrow after almost 3 months of confinement to their home region. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Karina Mitchell. This is Bloomberg. David.
Thank you so much, Karina. Well, airlines have been particularly hard hit by the pandemic, and it's not limited to U.S. airlines. Earlier today, our colleague Simone Foxman spoke with the CEO of Qatar Airways about the challenges his airline faces.
There is two parts to this question. One is when we will allow people to come back into the country as soon as it is possible, that people will be able to come back, and I think it will be very soon. They will have to get tested at the airport, and then they will have to go for 2 weeks quarantine in a hotel. Very similar to what's happening in the UK, in France, in Germany, in Switzerland, in Singapore, in India, in Bangkok. Everywhere, this is a requirement, and so will be a requirement in my country. When will the tourists come? This is, again, a difficult question to answer. They need to be comfortable. The media is giving so much mixed information about this virus that people are really uncertain of which way they have to go. I think that tourism will rebound as soon as there is a treatment or a vaccine.
At this time, have you asked the Qatari government for any assistance? Have you sought financing of any sort from banks? Where do you stand?
I'm very proud to say that Qatar Airways has still been using its own funds to continue our operations. We have not been to our government like most of the airlines around the world have gone for either state aid or subsidy. Exactly the airlines that used to accuse us of the same thing, and now they are going to ask for state aid and subsidy, whilst if we went to our government, we are going to ask for equity injection because our airline is owned by the government. We are still managing with the credit lines we have, the financing we had in place already. But as this may continue for a longer time, if it does, yes, we will ask for an equity injection from our owner, that is the state of Qatar.
One of the ways I know that you wanted to control costs was potentially delaying delivery of some of your aircraft, and that you'd been in discussions with Airbus and Boeing about that. Where did those negotiations end up, and which planes, if any, have you delayed in terms of deliveries?
I'm not unique into pushing back deliveries of our airplane and not accepting airplane deliveries. All the airlines in the world is in the same boat. And what is now important is for both Boeing and Airbus to show to their customers that they were not only with them in good times, but they will also be with them in bad times. And they should accept the requirements of the airlines to delay deliveries of the airplanes until at least 2022. And if they don't oblige, they should then also know that they will permanently lose us as a customer to them.
Have negotiations not gone well?
We are negotiating, and as usual in Qatar Airways, we don't put our chips on the table in front of the media whilst we are having delicate negotiations with our suppliers.
Fair enough. I mean, do you foresee a permanently smaller fleet, or is part of the argument that you guys are going to get back to normal?
Air travel has always rebounded after every upheaval. I think we will again start growing, but how quickly we will start to grow is a question that I don't think any chief executive can for sure answer.
That was the CEO of Qatar Airways speaking earlier today with Bloomberg Television. Coming up next here on Balance of Power, we're going to talk with the new acting control of the currency. He is Brian Brooks. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
At Asda, we're helping you shop safely by keeping our stores clean and limiting customer numbers so you can keep 2 meters apart. With our Scan and Go mobile app, you can reduce contact at the till too. Asda, we're all in this together. Subject to availability, mobile data charges may apply.
Are you ready for the realest first-hand take of what's happening in the NBA? On their podcast, All the Smoke, former NBA players Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson bring their fiery intensity to the mic, dishing on the latest news and drama from on and off the court without boundaries.
Half man, half amazing. My friend, our brother, Vince Carter, man. Welcome to the show.
Yo, what's up, man? What's up, my brother? Man, I'm good.
Search All the Smoke on TuneIn to listen.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. The Office of the Comptroller of Currency regulates all national banks, and it has a new head. Brian Brooks has just been named as the acting controller of the currency, and we welcome him now to Bloomberg. Welcome and congratulations, Mr. Brooks, I should say, in your new position. Give us a sense right now. We're in a crisis, absolutely. We've got a pandemic, we've got an economic downturn, and now we have civil unrest. How is that affecting, or is it likely to affect the banks that you're responsible for?
David, it is going to affect the banks, and let me just begin by saying that it's a crisis that we all have to take seriously, and the most current part of the crisis is one of the most tragic things I think either you or I have ever experienced in our lives. Nobody could watch the video of the tragic events, starting with the death of George Floyd in just an incredible act of brutality. That has set a spark to a tinderbox out there, and my heart goes out to everybody who's affected. It's one of the worst things I've ever seen in my whole life. Banks are going to be part of the solution here on my watch. I promise you that. And clearly the downturn has affected them, but they're the delivery system for rescue aid. So stay tuned, but we're going to help.
Do you have any sense of whether some of that delivery system is in jeopardy in some of these neighborhoods that have been so badly affected with looting and rioting and things? There are banks in those areas. Are they being impaired in their ability to be a delivery system?
Well, you know, David, one of the really tragic things, and the stories that don't get told often enough, is in a lot of these neighborhoods, there actually aren't banks. And that's part of the problem, is over the last 20 or 30 years, many banks eliminated their branches in low-income neighborhoods, in inner cities, and in parts of the country that we now call banking deserts. And that's what has led to some of the underinvestment that I think has produced the anger and the lack of opportunity that are leading to these protests today. So again, banks are having their own issues, and we're going to help them manage through all of that. But the real problem is kind of the opposite. It's that there aren't enough bank branches. There's not enough lending and investment in these communities. And that's, I think, what's causing this massive eruption out there that you're seeing.
So tell me about that a bit, because there's the immediate problem, obviously, of making sure that businesses stay up, the banks stay up, and things like that. But there's the longer-term issue that you really identify that we're going to have to address, I believe, in this country. Talk to us about the Community Reinvestment Act. Exactly what is that, and what's the role of your office in that?
Yeah, so, the Community Reinvestment Act was a really important law that was passed in 1977 to address the problem of banks only serving their preferred customers, which tended to be richer people and whiter people than the world as a whole. And the Community Reinvestment Act said, look, banks have a special privilege in our system. They have deposit insurance to prevent their depositors from losing money. They have access to the payment system, which the government has created. So they have a lot of special benefits. And the thinking was, in return for those benefits, they need to serve all their communities, not just the rich people or not just the people in the fancy neighborhoods. One of the things we've tried to do, David, just this year is to modernize and kind of reimagine the Community Reinvestment Act for the 21st century in ways that are designed specifically to help the kind of people who are expressing so much pain and anguish right now. The most important thing about it, David, is that historically we only measured banks' activities around their branches. And so the irony is, as banks started closing branches in poorer neighborhoods, they no longer got measured for their activities there, and the communities were sort of left behind. We're trying to solve for that today. We need to get their activities in a modern environment measured everywhere their customers live.
Yeah, it's such a great point. In so many parts of life, what you get as a result depends on what you're measuring. If you're measuring the wrong thing, you don't get the right result. At the same time, with the shutdown in so much of the country, that has affected the ability of businesses to repay loans and things. You've been outspoken on the possible dangers, even for the banking system, from that.
Yeah, David, I'm really very worried about this, and I think this is a piece of the puzzle that doesn't get well told. I think all of us take the human risk, the medical risk, the health risk of COVID-19 very, very seriously. But what we do in the world of policy is we have to balance risks and benefits, and we have to understand the consequences of our choices when we do those balancing. What worries me a lot is as we go into the third month and the fourth month of these broad shutdown orders, the consequences to people's lives become significant. And what I worry about is when we talk about reopening the economy, we're not really talking about money. We're talking about people's lives. Now, in the banking system, what that means is businesses that borrowed money so that they could start a restaurant or start a shoe repair shop or a dry cleaner, those businesses haven't generated revenue in 3 or 4 months in many of our cities. That hurts the banks because the loans that were taken out to finance those businesses can't get repaid. The good news is the banks are big and healthy and they'll be okay. What might not be okay are the small business owners in these communities that are trying to make their lives better, their communities better, to feed their families. And the longer this goes on, there will be a cascade of losses. I have to deal with the losses to the banks. That's my privilege and responsibility to deal with. What I worry about is somebody needs to take responsibility for the lives that are being really ruined by these long-term shutdowns and to balance that against the cost benefit.
Brian, let's turn to something that is rather technical now, and you are a lawyer with a background in financial regulation. I'm not, but the valid when made rule, which I had not really focused on, it sounds rather technical, but actually it could have real ramifications. Explain exactly why this is important and what is going on with your office.
Yeah, the valid when made rule, David, speaks to something that I think most of your watchers will understand intuitively, which is if I sign a contract with you and the contract is valid, and then you decide to assign that contract to somebody else, the terms of the contract don't change. If I promise to pay you rent and then you sell that contract to somebody else, I have to pay that person rent. The amount of the rent doesn't change. It's whatever the rent was when we made it. The quirk in banking law is that we allow banks to lend at an interest rate that's legal in their home state, and they can export that rate anywhere they want to. There was a funny decision out of a single court of appeals in New York a few years ago that said that even if a bank makes a loan that is legal when it's made, if the bank sells that loan to somebody else, the interest rate can become illegal because that investor is not a bank. That's sort of crazy, right? If you borrow money at 5%, you borrowed money at 5%. And if a new investor takes that loan, it should still be 5%. The reason this matters to people is if banks can't sell their loans in the market, then it means that the only credit that will ever be supplied in the country will be bank balance sheet credit, and banks are only so big. In our country, the reason we're a rich society is because we allow credit to come from a lot of different sources, some from the bank's balance sheet and some from the capital markets. So what the valid when made rule was designed to do is to bring more credit into the economy, which is something I strongly believe in. You know, the Federal Reserve a few years ago did a famous study, and the title of the study when it was reported was More Credit, Less Poverty. And one of my missions is to educate people to understand that credit is a good thing. Responsibly managed, prudently originated credit is what people need to build lives. So I come back to, you look at the protests and the riots that are going on in America, part of it is because we haven't had equal access to credit and capital. That's where opportunity comes from.
Okay, really appreciate you being with us, Mr. Brooks. And once again, congratulations on your new position as acting controller of the currency. That is Brian Brooks. Coming up here, we're going to talk about those protests and the civil unrest with a political scientist from Fordham. She is Christina Greer. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are mixed as a drop in tech stocks offset gains for banks, gun makers, and energy. The Dow is up 122 points, S&P up 4. The Nasdaq is down 35 points. Bank of America is pledging $1 billion to help communities around the country address racial and economic inequality. Reuters says this makes the big bank the first to make such a promise. The bank CEO says it's the events of the past week that have created a sense of urgency. McDonald's is holding a company town hall meeting today. Workers are getting a chance to tell execs what can be done to foster more racial inclusion in corporate outreach. And in deal news, Western Union is in talks to acquire its rival money transfer service, MoneyGram. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Hi, everyone. Al Roker here. As a guy with his own catchphrase, I appreciate that after 75 years, Smokey's only said,
"Only you can prevent wildfires."
But I'm filling in because there's a lot more to report. Like when it's dry or windy. Be careful burning yard waste, because wildfires can even start in your neck of the woods. Go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
In these times of loss and crisis, the people you trust to ask the questions you need answered become even more vital.
Should the president, though, impose the Defense Production Act?
Carol Masser and Jason Kelly.
Help us understand what we know so far.
Bloomberg Business Week.
They are on the front line of the impact of the coronavirus.
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
This is Balance Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. It's time now for Bloomberg First Word News, and for that we go to Karina Mitchell.
David, Mayor Bill de Blasio still plans to begin reopening New York City on June 8th, despite the unrest related to protests over the death of George Floyd and a curfew that will continue for the rest of the week. Last week, the mayor estimated that between 200,000 and 400,000 people will be returning to work in construction, manufacturing, wholesale, and curbside retail during the first phase of the city's reopening. In Tokyo, the government is urging residents to use more caution after seeing a spike in new coronavirus cases. Businesses in the capital could be asked to close their doors again if the surge continues. Tokyo reported 34 cases today, the most in one day since May 9th. And the return of a tradition. Parisians began to return to the city's beloved sidewalk cafes as lockdown restrictions ease today. Paris officials are allowing outside seating areas with indoor seating off limits until June 22nd. And tables need to be spaced at least 3 feet apart, sharply cutting the number of customers able to be served at one time. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Karina Mitchell. This is Bloomberg. David.
Thanks so much, Karina. Well, last night we saw another night of civil unrest across the country, even after President Trump threatened to send in federal troops if mayors and governors couldn't get their arms around it. Welcome now political scientist Christina Greer. She's an associate professor of political science at Fordham and also the author of the book Black Ethnics, Race, Immigration, and the American Dream. Thank you so much, Professor, for being back with us. Give us your perspective on a broader sense about where this civil unrest falls on a spectrum.
Well, I mean, I think we've definitely reached a boiling point. If we look at major cities and smaller cities across the nation, most people of my generation have never seen anything on this scale. But we have to ask ourselves, what is the root cause? And we know that it's not just about George Floyd. It's about systemic inequality. It's about a segment of the citizenry living under a constant state of fear and police violence. It's about rampant inequality. It's about 40 million Americans filing for unemployment, and we know millions more of not having any job prospects. It's about a failure of the federal government to deal with the global pandemic and people feeling the pain and the anguish of over 100,000 Americans dead, and knowing that the president and members of his party aren't going to do anything to save or assist Americans that don't look a certain way or live in particular places. And so I think the peace that lots of people want to have and want to return to, quite frankly, isn't possible until understand the extent to which justice has not been served.
Exactly. And if we're going to make progress, I think we need to be very careful about the various elements of it, because they tend to get mashed together. We have the police issue, which is clearly an issue. Nobody would deny that, having seen that video. We've got a real problem in this country, and it's not limited to Minneapolis. But we also have, as you say, the broader question of inequality, inequality of income, of wealth, of educational opportunity, of health care, which we saw really come to the forefront with this pandemic, as there was such a disproportionate effect on African Americans as well as on Hispanics, I must say. As we see these protests, what should they be protesting for, if I can ask it that way? What is it we could do concretely? What policy measures could we take that would start to address this?
So I just want to address one thing. You said no one would deny the video. Sadly, David, many people deny that video. They see nothing wrong with that video. There's always the question of, well, he probably did something before the police officer had to kneel on his neck. I've gotten lots of messages from unsavory individuals who are very happy. They view that it's one less black person in this country. We can't say that no one disagrees with that video. There's a real divide as to whether or not that excessive use of force that led to the death of George Floyd, or excessive use of force that led to the death of Eric Garner, or excessive use of force that led to the death of Breonna Taylor, who's an EMT. Sadly, there are a lot of people who think that that use of force is justified and in some ways glorified, because they don't think that black Americans belong in this country and that they should ever have the full rights of citizens. And so when you're asking what's the protest for, I mean, I, as a political scientist, firmly believe that protest politics and electoral politics have to go hand in hand. We don't get substantive changes in policy usually in the country until people take to the streets and show our elected leaders just how fed up they are. And once that policy comes into fruition, oftentimes there are more protests to push it even further. As we talked about what happened in the 60s, many of those uprisings and rebellions and protests, the end result was the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 65, the Immigration Act of 65, the Housing Act. We had those two in conjunction, protests and electoral change. And I think a lot of folks want to see change, not just at the federal level, with the abdication of the executive and his powers and his lack of understanding of what being executive should be, but a lot of people want to see some substantive change on their local and state levels, and that has nothing to do with partisanship. There are people who are really disappointed in Democratic mayors and how they've abdicated to police departments and assisted in providing them with hyper paramilitary gear that will be used against their own residents. So I think that we want to see policy changes as to how communities interact with police, how police are trained to see members of communities, how educators are trained, how healthcare professionals are trained, how allocations of resources are distributed. I think that's the real end result of these protests. And unfortunately, quiet kneeling on the sidelines of a football field didn't yield results for certain individuals. Lots of people had an awakening, but many did not. Many refused to see what quiet kneeling would do. And so now we've moved beyond quiet kneeling, and it's making people's lives very uncomfortable, and they want it to go away. But I think the pain of so many of the protesters is it won't go away until you recognize the lack of justice and equality in this country.
Professor, I certainly take your point and agree with it that in a democracy, the only way you get fundamental change is through the ballot box, through politics. At the same time, when was the last time any administration, either Democrat or Republican at the national level, made a real difference in inequality in this country? Because I've seen numbers that indicate the difference between 1945 and 1980 and 1980 to the current time is dramatic in the growth in inequality since 1980, and that continued through Democratic and Republican administrations.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm saying. Some of this anguish actually has nothing to do with partisanship. Much of it does with Donald Trump and his white nationalist rhetoric, but much of it is that you're seeing people feel like no matter who's in power, things aren't changing. Now, I think we can, be a little more specific and explicit, and we can see policies that have happened under Democratic presidents versus Republican presidents and see how that's played out for many communities. But we also know that, there's some generational wealth conversations that we have to still address that affect who's in power. So, the fact that the GI Bill was not distributed properly, the fact that FDR made some concessions that excluded black women, and we're still seeing the generational effects, the fact that the 2008 housing crisis, eviscerated the little bit of black wealth that has been circling within communities. And so I think that it needs to be a much broader partisan conversation, but on the day-to-day, we can also see, though, that there are real distinctions between the two parties when it comes to whether it's job creation, whether it's criminal justice, whether it's environmental policy, which we know disproportionately affects Black and Latinx communities, which puts an undue burden on their healthcare prices in communities that don't really have hospitals and resources, which then further eviscerates the family wealth or lack thereof. So it's not always a direct one-to-one. Sometimes we have to sort of see the byproducts and the other effects of how this plays out in communities and keeps this inequity continuing to grow.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. That is Associate Professor Christina Greer, Political Science Associate Professor from Fordham University. Coming up here, risk seems to be growing around all the entire world. We're going to be talking about that next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. NJIT faculty mentored Christoph Camacho when he was a student, helping him co-found a startup and patent a device that uses drone technology for reforestation and to collect valuable data for land management.
I founded Paratrees back in 2016, taking what I learned from my research at NJIT and migrating it to a startup. Our technology is to really enhance land management operations, so we work very closely with land management companies. So we have a drone that performs precision reforestation, and we do storm damage assessment, having access to drones that can collect data, so it's much faster. And what is more important, we help them drive management decisions. NJIT has been there every step of the way, going full force with my company.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Three major U.S. indices are mixed as a drop in tech stocks blunted gains for banks, automakers, and energy companies. The dollar is down for a fourth straight day. The S&P was little changed, even as two shares gained for every one that fell, with losses for Facebook and Apple weighing on the gauge. We look at the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. S&P 500's up 0.25%, up 7. The Dow's up 0.5%, up 140. And the NASDAQ is down 0.2%, down 19. The 10-year is down 6/32, with a yield of 0.67%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is now up 2.8% at $36.43 a barrel, with COMEX gold down over 1% at $17.3250 an ounce. The dollar yen is at 108.68. The euro $1.1168, and the British pound $1.2550. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Balance of Power continues with David Weston.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. We're seeing risks, not just in the United States, but around the world, increase. And some people have spent careers trying to study those risks and understand them. One of them is Andrea Bonin-Blanc. She is the founder and the CEO of, give me the name. Andrea, are you there? 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 And
GEC Risk Advisory.
GEC Advisory. GEC Advisory. I knew it. I just forgot it. Sorry, Andrea. Thank you so much for being here. You understand these risks so terribly well. You have a way of really thinking about them in longer terms. Give us your framework and exactly how does it apply to things like civil unrest across the entire country, as well as a pandemic and an economic crisis? What is it telling us about where we are?
So I did a book about 6 months ago. It was published about 6 months ago called Gloom to Boom, How Leaders Transform Risk into Resilience and Value. And I start the book with what I call the 10 mega trends of our turbulent times. And this came out right before the pandemic started. So it's really talking about the bigger mega trends, the things that are happening over a period of years rather than just months or 12 months. And to me, the pandemic fits in terms of the social unrest that we're seeing, the healthcare challenges, under the rubric of the rise of ESG issues, environmental, social, and governance issues, which have been rising very, very fastly in the U.S. over the last couple of years, but have been around for a while. And under ESG, the social piece is really where the pandemic fits really well, where the issues coming from the healthcare challenges of the pandemic fit really well. I'm talking about worker health and safety. I'm talking about employment issues. I'm talking about, finding the right kinds of vaccines, et cetera, and the challenges that businesses have to keep up with these issues. And I would just suggest that the businesses that have been keeping up with these issues, the social issues, the ESG issues, I've added a T for technology, ESG and T, the companies that do a good job of incorporating those kinds of issues into their risk management and their governance oversight are the ones that are going to be more resilient and capable of dealing with these kinds of turbulent times that we have right now.
So Andrew, we hear a lot about ESG and now ESGT, as you style it. And in fact, I've talked to some investors in recent weeks that say, you know what, given the pandemic, those stocks, if you can categorize them, actually are doing better than other stocks. So investors seem to be going there. At the same time, how do we measure it? Particularly social, which is very prominent, as you say, particularly in this pandemic. I talked with Jay Clayton, who's the chair of the SEC, earlier today about that very question. I'm not sure how you measure social. If you're an investor, how do you know which companies to invest in?
Well, this is one of the biggest challenges of our times is we have the rise of ESG as a bunch of potential metrics to judge companies and their performance by, but we have a variety of different ESG metrics that different organizations are proposing. And this has been going on for, 1 to 2 decades at this point, but I think it's coming to a head. And both companies and investors will start getting a little closer as to what the metrics are the most important ones to look at. Certainly there are OSHA kinds of metrics that are very relevant to today. The Occupational Health and Safety Administration, when we look at some of the issues that are taking place at the large meat processing factories and manufacturing facilities, how the workers are being treated, how many people get sick. These kinds of metrics can be very granular, and I think we just have to learn from experience and sort of, understand the most important ones for purposes of the social piece, the environmental piece, the governance piece, and the technology piece. But it's going to be a while before we get there. I just think it's really good that we're talking about it as much as we are right now, and that the SEC is actually looking at it too. And from the perspective of creating some order of the chaos, I think it's great that they're demanding more more discipline in terms of what the metrics mean and what the ESG funds are trying to do and what the companies are offering, because there's a lot of potential ESG washing for sure.
So, Andrea, I'd like to borrow from your rubric a couple of specific points that may apply given the crisis we're facing. One of them is global trust is collapsing. One of the things that you say is there's a problem with global trust. And the other, which may be related, is 21st century ethical leadership, the sort of lack of that leadership. As we look around right now, where should we look for that kind of leadership that we trust at the same time? Is it the public sphere? Is it the private sphere? Are you seeing it anywhere?
Yes, I am seeing it in some places, and I think the silver lining to the very big clouds that we have right now is that we're seeing it both in the business sector and in the government sector. And if we just take our own country as an example, I think there are certain governors and local officials, whether it has to do with the pandemic or with the civil unrest that we now have, that are actually acting with responsibility, caring about their stakeholders, which are the citizens. If we look across the world, we certainly see certain countries that are doing way better than others, and it always goes back to leadership. And so that's the silver lining that I'm seeing, and that's also happening in the business sector. You're seeing CEOs of prominent companies speaking up, discussing the issue of inequality, of racism at work, saying that we need to do much more than we ever have on these topics. So that's all good silver lining, but it's really in the context of a much darker cloud, I think, which is the darker cloud of trust and leadership has been collapsing for the last 10 years or so, and Edelman Trust Barometer is a really good resource to understand that. And I would say that that trust factor is something that leaders have to earn, and if they don't serve their most important stakeholders on a regular, consistent basis, not just at the time of crisis, they will have that trust deficit. So we're at a crossroads, and I think it's very important for the right kind of leaders to be leading, both in business and government and also, of course, in society.
Well, and Andrea, I also want to ask about that T that you added to ESG, the technology side of it, and to ask an overly simplistic question. At this point, is it helping us or hurting us? Because I think I see examples of both.
You're absolutely right. I think it's both a risk and an opportunity. The technology piece, the reason I've added it to ESG is because if we look around, or if we just stand in our own homes as we are right now, many of us, technology is enabling us in all kinds of ways, and technology is threatening us in a bunch of different ways. And, the cyber attack issue and the fact that COVID-19 has actually heightened that threat because everybody's working from home, and suddenly we have, myriad more targets for the cyber attackers to target. We really do live in a time where ESG and technology issues are all wrapped up and interconnected. And I think it's really important for both business people, governments, and us individually as human beings to think about those things and to both protect ourselves and also take advantage of opportunities that are presenting themselves right now.
Another thing you talk about is transparency versus opacity. And I wonder, connected with technology, and particularly social media perhaps right now, is more information informing us more or not? Are we building a Tower of Babel because there's so much information out there? It is not checked. We've given up on editors. We've given up on gatekeepers. Is that helping us as a society address some of the challenges you identify?
Absolutely not. I mean, I think, with sort of the expression garbage in, garbage out, if you allow all kinds of garbage to come into either social media or just discourse, the results will be not transparency, but opacity. And the trend that you're talking about that I talk about in my book is really, it starts with the idea that reputation risk was an issue that was accelerated by the rise of social media, but it also created this hyper-transparency, which was a good thing, in my opinion of many. But with time, we've seen the rise of the manipulation of information, of misinformation, of dark web, manipulated videos and audios and what have you. So we don't even know where the borderline is between reality and fake. And so we have the rise not only of hyper-transparency on the one hand, but also super opacity in the sense that we don't know which end is up. And so I agree with you. We're living in a very turbulent time. I'm the kind of person who will say more information is better, but it has to be good information. And not information that creates social issues and even, can have terrible physical effects if, for example, social media, false information is unleashed and people attack each other, for example.
All right. Thank you so much, Andrea. Really great to have you with us. That is Andrea Bonin-Blanc, and she is the founder and CEO of GEC Risk Advisory. Coming up here, we're going to have our stock of the hour, which is Vista Outdoor, and I'll give you a hint, it has to do with guns. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Working from home, take a little more.
This is an important update from the government about coronavirus symptoms and testing. If you have any one of the following symptoms, a high temperature, a new continuous cough, loss of taste or smell, you can now get tested. Do not leave home for any reason other than to get tested. Find out how to get a test and how long to isolate at nhs.uk/coronavirus. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man, into the end zone,
Come explore TuneIn's Classic Game Replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There are going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
Touchdown! Search Classic Game Replays to listen for free.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. It is time now for our stock of the hour. It is Vista Outdoors, and I understand it has something to do with guns. Kaylee Lyons is here to explain it to me. Kaylee?
Yeah, David, you're absolutely right. Vista Outdoors, of course, is an ammunition gun manufacturer. It is higher for an 8th straight day, up about 50% over the course of the past 8 sessions. Today, like yesterday, it's taking part in really a broad rally from gun manufacturers and other weapon stocks, all outperforming as we see these riots taking place across the U.S. and the president, of course, threatening to deploy large numbers of troops across U.S. cities. And in addition to that, we also got National Instant criminal background check data for May, showed background checks were up 75% last month, double-digit growth in every single state except Hawaii, the 3rd highest number of checks in the entire 22-year history. And this follows soaring background checks in both April and March. March, in fact, seeing a record number of background checks. And it just kind of shows this phenomenon of people concerned about the pandemic and its social effects going out and stockpiling guns. In the 3 months since the COVID-19 crisis began, more than 6 million guns have been purchased. An analyst over at KeyBank was noting today that these are really, quote, fear-based purchases amid the elevated social unrest we're seeing, and that this is likely to continue this month and in the coming months, especially as we get closer to the U.S. election, David.
Yeah, I mean, whether one agrees with it or not, it makes sense to me. I mean, because given what we've seen with the pandemic and then the economic problems and now the civil unrest, it feels like the social fabric may be fraying, which makes us all nervous. At the same time, none of that concern seems to be spilling over to the equity markets more generally. We wake up every morning and expect the markets to be down, and they're not. So how can they be going 2 different directions?
Well, we're seeing this kind of continuation of the Main Street versus Wall Street narrative. As you allude to, stocks are higher for a 3rd day today, despite the fact that we do have these ongoing riots, any potential disruptions they could cause. And really what you're seeing is that investors don't seem to think that these riots at this point will have a material impact on the growth outlook. You're seeing that underscored not just the fact that stocks are higher today, but once again, it is those cyclical growth-sensitive sectors outperforming. Energy, materials, financials are the ones leading the rally, while you're seeing stocks like tech underperforming today, really leading the market lower. The NASDAQ, I should mention, is in the red. So you're seeing that the market isn't too concerned about this, even if American gun buyers are at this point.
Yeah, exactly. They seem to be betting on a recovery, don't they?
Yeah, they absolutely do. You're seeing that in the fact that, too, that the dollar is weaker for 4 days in a row. The greenback is kind of losing some of its safe haven appeal as the market seems to be focusing much more on that economic recovery narrative than anything else at this point.
Okay, Kaylee, really terrific reporting. Appreciate it greatly. That is Kaylee Lyons reporting on Vista Outdoors. That does it for the first hour of Balance of Power for today. We'll have a second hour, which will be on radio. Among other things, I'll get to talk to the mayor of my hometown, Flint, Michigan. That is Sheldon Neely. We'll also talk with the former director of the CBO, Douglas Holtz-Eakin. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury.
Whether or not you believe amethyst chunks help with emotional distress or rose quartz can promote harmony and love, in the COVID era, the $1 billion market for crystals is outshining diamonds. The value of near gemstones such as quartz, amethyst, citrine, and malachite is holding steady, while diamonds are expected to be dented 20% this year. Sotheby's and Christie's sell them for tens of thousands of dollars alongside meteorites and fossils. If azurite doesn't strike your fancy, how about a piece of a pop star's soul? The musician Grimes, who you may also know as Elon Musk's girlfriend and new mother, is having dual fine art exhibitions titled Selling Out, online through August 31st. The singer, whose real name is Claire Boucher, is selling drawings, prints, photographs, and conceptual pieces, including, yes, a percentage of her soul, valued at best offer. Visit BloombergPursuits.com for more. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
You're living in a world built on science, political and economic.
You've got to believe the labor market gets hit.
Computer and medical.
Clarify where we are on a test.
It all makes a difference.
What do you think needs to happen in terms of governmental response?
And it's all here.
He expects the virus to peak quite a long time from now.
Get your science straight.
The hand washing campaign, is this actually a good strategy?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
You know your body, and you know when something's off, when something doesn't feel quite right. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, rashes, and fever. They could be signs of lupus. Listen to your body. Take care of yourself. We're here to help you take control of your health. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Jenny Liss, Jewish communal leader and philanthropist, talks about why she chose the Jewish Communal Fund for her family's charitable giving.
For a lot of people, it would be the convenience factor. I don't have to track anything.
If charitable giving is an important part of your life, JCF can help you organize your philanthropy with our donor-advised fund. A fund can be established with a minimum tax-deductible contribution of $5,000. Make grants to your favorite charities, and JCF handles all the administration and reporting.
At the year end, our board awards community grants from fees and endowment income to UJ's annual campaign. We also make gifts to specific organizations, the elderly, Holocaust survivors, the hungry. The fact that we come together as a community at the end of the year to build community, that's what makes us different.
Get better at giving back. To find out more about JCF's impact, visit jcfny.org and download the Giving Report. JCF, we have a gift for giving.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. It is an up day for the Dow, the S&P, a down day for NASDAQ. Stocks are trading mixed right now. Bottom line, though, most stocks are grinding higher. Along equities in Europe and Asia amid new bouts of stimulus and positive economic signals as coronavirus lockdowns ease. Right now, we have got the S&P 500 index advancing by 8 points, now at 3,064, up another 0.3%. The Dow is up 156 points. That is a gain of 0.6%. NASDAQ retreating, lower a little change, down less than 0.1% right now, down 8 points at 95.43. The 10-year down 6/32 with a yield of 0.68%, and West Texas Intermediate crude oil up 2.9% at 36.48 a barrel. And with more on the commodities picture, here's Bloomberg's Renita Young.
Investors are eyeing a potential extension of record oil production curbs by OPEC Plus, while physical markets show renewed signs of tightness. Delegates said Russia and several OPEC allies are said to favor prolonging current curbs by 1 month, though it was unclear whether key power broker Saudi Arabia had agreed to the suggestion. Crude also reacts today as the market for real barrels shows signs of strength. Renita Young, Bloomberg Radio.
Sources tell Bloomberg celebrity makeup brand Charlotte Tilbury is nearing a deal to Puig. That's the Spanish company behind Paco Rabanne perfumes, in a deal valuing the business at more than $1 billion. Also, sources say Western Union is seeking to acquire MoneyGram International in a transaction that would bring together two of the largest American providers of money transfer services. Shares of both companies are surging on that news. MoneyGram International up 33.5%. Western Union up by 10.8%. Again, developing story, one that we continue to monitor. 102 on Wall Street. Time now for the Market Drivers Report with a focus on American depository receipts. And here is Dave Wilson.
Thanks, Charlie. ADRs are rising more than U.S. shares. The S&P ADR index is up 1.2%. And the S&P 500 is higher by 0.3%. France's Airbus has climbed 6.4% in U.S. trading. The biggest customer for the plane makers A320 Neo jets, India's Indigo, reaffirmed plans to buy, quote, a large number, end quote, of the aircraft. Indigo added 42 of the planes in its most recent fiscal year, which ended in March. And speaking of India, Tata Motors has risen 9.2%. The automaker said it resumed production at all plants in its home country. Tata also said its UK unit Jaguar Land Rover is bringing back output at plants locally and elsewhere in Europe. Canadian gold mining ADRs are lower, along with the price of the precious metal. Barrick Gold is down 3.2%, and Kinross Gold has dropped 4.6%. And Germany's Adidas, also known as Adidas, has fallen 1.7%. The New York Times reported that the athletic wear maker closed its U.S. stores after a Los Angeles location was looted. Charlie?
All right, I thank you very much, Dave Wilson, keeping track of those ADRs. He mentioned gold down 0.8% right now, $17.25 the ounce, lower by $14 the ounce. Again, recapping equities trading mixed. The Dow, the S&P, they're both higher. NASDAQ lower. S&P up now by 10, up 0.3%, 12-week high, by the way. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Balance of Power.
Everybody in the world has one common enemy, and that's to win the war against this virus.
The first thing you do is listen to the medical professionals.
Those people that lost their pay, we want to see that pay continued.
Where the world of politics meets the world of business.
Our priority is the health and well-being and the lives of the American people.
We want to make sure that we are continuing to support our hospitals.
We've unleashed our most potent weapon of all, the courage of the American people.
Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
Another night of protests and riots and looting rack a nation already coping with COVID-19. The economy hangs in a balance between public health and government support. And President Trump says he'll send in the troops to quell civil unrest if need be. From New York, welcome to the second hour of Bloomberg Balance of Power. I'm David Weston. Last night saw continued protests, riots, and looting, including here in New York City, as vandals broke into stores in various locations across Manhattan, even after President Trump had called on governors and mayors to get things under control. If they don't, he's going to send in federal troops. We welcome now one of the mayors contending with the dual threats from the coronavirus and civil unrest. He is Mayor Sheldon Neely of Flint, Michigan. As listeners to this program know, that is my hometown. Welcome, Mr. Mayor. Good to have you with us. Thanks for joining us. Give us a sense of what's going on in Flint. What happened last night?
Well, last night was a very peaceful protest. You know, you and I will share in the pride that we have in our city by the people who participated in the actual protest. It was a very peaceful protest, and so we redefined the word protest, and so we redefined it as protest as being a word that builds versus a word that tears things apart. And so I was very proud of our city, and you should be as well.
So it's interesting. Flint, I do know well. I was born there, largely grew up there as well. It has had a lot of troubles over the last generation. I think it's fair to say. Lost a lot of auto plants, a lot of jobs. It's not a wealthy city by any means. Why is it, at the moment at least, knock wood, is it holding up better? We had your Genesee County Sheriff on just yesterday who was seen walking with the protesters. Why are we not seeing the level of violence and looting we're seeing in some other cities, do you think, Mr. Mayor?
Well, you know, the city of Flint is no stranger to controversy and crisis. But what we do have is a true spirit of champions in this community, and we are able to resurrect ourselves from any particular crisis that we may face. And so we have a little bit of resilience to the type of things that's going on throughout our country. And so we're able to adapt to certain things and certain situations, to the crisis with the water, the crisis with our economic system, to the crisis with our social things that's going on, and also with the health crisis. And Flint being a largely African-American community that's been hardest hit, one of the hardest hit communities throughout our country, we have a level of resilience and a strong Flint pride and a Flint spirit that says, we will champion our way through. And one thing about our spirit is so strong, we're able to just hold firmly to it. And so there's one thing that, there's no prosthetic for an amputated spirit. And so I would like to say that our community has not lost the spirit of the champion.
Well, give us some baseline numbers, if you could. Where are you with the coronavirus, and particularly the rate of increase in cases, for that matter, I'm sorry to say mortalities, because I know Flint has been hit hard. And where are you on unemployment as well, where the whole country's been hit terribly hard?
Well, we have an uptick, in the greater parts as far as the unemployment numbers. I don't have those numbers readily available to me, but we are one of the hardest hit communities in the state of Michigan. This is the birthplaces, of General Motors, and when they started to evacuate those jobs, we were one of the hardest hit cities in Michigan. But with the death tolls, we're probably represents about 40% of the total deaths in our county, and so we're one of the hardest hit communities, but we have a lot of resources with our governor, Gretchen Whitmer, which she's doing a fantastic job, and the support of our state representative, Cynthia Neely, as well as our state senators and our National Guard. We did mass testing where people are getting tested in mass, and so we can do some contact tracings to find out how we can do things better as it relates to protecting residents inside the city of Flint. So we have some challenges. Nevertheless, I've said that we have a crisis on top of a crisis with a side of crisis, but through the grace of God, we're faring very well as it relates to our spirit and what we're doing, and we're a guiding light to the rest of the country on how to really engage protest in a positive engagement. And yesterday, we introduced a couple resolutions as it relates to police violence against residents, and also a city ordinance outlawing profiling by residents and reporting of crimes against people of color. And so not only are we protesting, but we actually are providing action for the residents, and that's the thing that we're engaging in. The people are talking, the people are expressing their pain, and we are reacting to it, not with just talk or rhetoric. We're actually implementing instruments of change.
What do you need? You said that Governor Whitmer's doing a good job as far as you're concerned. What do you need beyond what she's giving you at the state level? What do you need from the federal government right now?
Well, our economic ecosystem has been disrupted for many years, and so we need a level of supporting tools in our education system. So we need the federal government to help us support our teachers and our education systems in the public system versus private systems or charter systems. We need to be able to educate ourselves up and through. You and I, we grew up in this as a manufacturing, industrialized community, but now we need to turn our focus to academic type of environment. We have 4 universities inside the city of Flint, and one of the misnomers about the state of Michigan, when we think about the college capital of the state of Michigan, people usually think Ann Arbor or Lansing, but we have more college students and people enrolled in college inside the city of Flint than anywhere else in the state of Michigan, because we have the 4 universities with Mott College, the University of Michigan, Kettering University, and Baker University. And so with the collaboration of college people, college students enrolled, we have more people enrolled in colleges inside the city of Flint than anywhere else in the state of Michigan. So we need to capture our intellectual property and capitalize on that. And so we need the federal government to support those types of infrastructures in the rebuilding and the retooling of a community such as Flint.
Are the colleges going to be in a financial position to do that? Because a lot of them are hurting themselves.
Right. Well, our country is hurting. The state of Michigan has realized about more than $3 billion revenue decrease, it's going to have a trickle-down effect through the revenue sharing that it provides for communities, income tax base. It's going to have a trickle-down effect. Right. But I think if the federal government looks in a system of triage, what communities need the most help, I think they need to really focus on the city of Flint as we still are trying to recover from our water crisis.
We all wish you well. Thank you so much. That's Flint Mayor Sheldon Neely. Coming up, we're going to talk with Bloomberg Opinion's Max Neeson about whether we need a treatment for COVID-19 rather than a vaccine. That's coming in next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
Reopenings.
Is there a likelihood that we have a sustained recovery?
Requirements.
Lawmakers have passed sweeping legislation.
Returns.
The president signed an executive order.
Bloomberg Daybreak with Karen Moscow and Nathan Hager.
We continue our Bloomberg Radio team coverage.
Everything you need now.
Let's head to Washington now.
Bloomberg Daybreak. Weekday mornings at 5 Eastern. On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
If knowledge is power, the Bloomberg Terminal is your power up, connecting you to real-time financial data, market-moving news, powerful analytics, and an influential network of financial decision makers around the world. Share ideas, negotiate trades, and gain the insight you need to make more informed decisions. See how the terminal can take your workflow to the next level at Bloomberg.com/professional.
The possibility of lung cancer can be pretty scary, especially if you're one of approximately 8 million current or former smokers at high risk. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know that now there's a breakthrough low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early, and it only takes 60 seconds. You stop smoking, now start screening. For an easy quiz to see if you're eligible, visit SaveByTheScan.org. It could save your life. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council. How long?
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
The IBM Flash storage solution can be broken down into 3 S's. Speed, retrieve data fast. Scalability, grow your storage as your business grows. Simplicity, easily migrate and integrate with existing systems. Oh, and there's a 4th. It's surprisingly affordable, with a recommended monthly price of £200 for 26 terabytes. Order by the 30th of June and pay nothing for 90 days. Visit ibm.biz/flash offer now.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Hairbands to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs. Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. save lives.
Okay, here we go.
With the NFL draft in the books and the schedule set, check out a TuneIn podcast for daily updates on the lead up to the 2020 season, like the Ringer NFL Show, where a rotating cast of Ringer experts talk with players, coaches, and special guests about the NFL landscape.
A lot of the other teams that we consider...
Or ESPN's NFL Live.
If there are some delays because of the COVID-19...
Search sports on TuneIn to explore these pods and much more.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunningham to Fiala, he scores!
And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic game replays to start listening.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
Brian Windhorst and the Hoop Collective Podcast.
What about Giannis Antetokounmpo? He is going to be eligible to sign a Supermax extension, which we were projecting to be worth $240 million this summer. Well, if the salary cap drops, and even if he's wonderfully happy in Milwaukee, it may make no sense for him to sign when he can just wait a year and wait for the revenues to recover and then lock in.
Subscribe to Brian Windhorst and the Hoop Collective.
Search the Hoop Collective to listen.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. The advance for the U.S. stock market continues. NASDAQ just turning higher. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing. Stocks rising alongside equities in Europe and Asia amid new bouts of stimulus and positive economic signals as coronavirus lockdowns ease. The dollar fell for a fourth straight day. Right now we have got the 10-year down 7/32 with a yield of 0.68%. Gold down 0.8%, 17.26 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude rallying 3.1% now with a 36 handle, 36.54, up $1.10 a barrel. Again, WTI up by 3.1%. Equities higher across the board, an almost 200-point jump right now for the Dow, up 0.8% at 25,675. S&P up 13, up 0.5. NASDAQ up 7, a gain of 0.1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It's time now for Bloomberg Opinion, and welcome today, columnist Max Neeson. So, Max, thanks for being with us. You really caught my eye and others with your column that's out that says, maybe we're too fixated on a vaccine. Maybe we should be thinking more about treatment. Explain to us first why the vaccine may not be as likely as some people are thinking it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing about vaccines is you're intending to give them to a really large population of otherwise healthy people. That means a high safety bar, and that means that in order to test them properly, you need to give them out to a lot of people. And further, to test their efficacy and safety, you need to test them in areas where the virus is circulating. You need to have people in a control arm that actually contract the virus so you can compare it, when that happens and how often compared to the vaccine arm. And you also need people who have taken the vaccine to be challenged by infection so you can see what happens to them in terms of safety and their ability to transmit or potential to get sick when they actually do encounter the virus. When you're talking about multiple different vaccine trials, all trying to get that data from thousands of people at the same time, you're talking about a really serious bottleneck when most of the world is taking really serious public health efforts to prevent infection, to prevent those data points that you're trying to collect, more or less. So it's a real problem, and one that there isn't really a solution to. It's just one of those things you fundamentally can't speed up. So while I am optimistic that these massive efforts from governments and companies to generate all these candidates and move them along quickly will eventually get us to a vaccine, though those ambitious timelines remain, something of a best case scenario.
Eventually being the important word there. Does that suggest that some of the companies that already are in mid-stage trials like Moderna may have a leg up because they're ahead of the bottleneck?
Yeah, if they do start running those late stage large trials quicker, they can get that data more rapidly. Of course, that doesn't remove the biggest barrier, which is making sure you actually have an effective and safe vaccine. But it does give them the potential to get that verdict a little sooner if they can keep their pace up relative to other companies.
Okay, so go over to the other side of this, and that's the vaccine. I'm sorry, the treatments. We've heard a fair amount, including from the President of the United States, about things like remdesivir and hydroxychloroquine. But at the same time, we've heard that there are problems with those. Are there any treatments that look like they are more likely to succeed?
Yeah, a good number of them. There are a few different categories. There are some other repurposed drugs along the lines of remdesivir and hydroxychloroquine. A big group of them targeting inflammation, the immune response, which may lead to worse outcomes in some patients. Some encouraging results from those, and there are a lot more trials to read out. And then sort of in the medium term as a potential bridge to a vaccine, antibody therapies, basically antibodies deliberately targeted at the coronavirus that have the potential to be both a short-term vaccine and a treatment. Those are just starting trials and can also get to market a little bit faster, because the nice thing about a treatment is you know the outcome of someone who's sick with coronavirus relatively soon compared to a vaccine trial where the outcome and the time that data comes in is fundamentally a little bit more random.
What about the safety of these antibody treatments? And I guess there are two categories. One is, if I can say it, organic. That is to say, it's an antibody a person generated, and the other is synthetic.
So in terms of these particular set of treatments, it's early days. Some evidence from trials of convalescent plasma, from donated plasma of recovered individuals, that there doesn't appear to be a huge safety issue. And in terms of the antibodies, this is an approach that's been used for years at many other targets, and in some cases without too much in the way of safety issues. But it will also take trials, if smaller and faster ones relative to a vaccine, to determine the safety effects of what right now are, I think, three different candidates that are in the furthest stages, and many more behind them.
So Regeneron is one that's doing the synthetic side. They did it, I guess, successfully for Ebola. Is that correct?
That is correct. So that's one reason to be a little bit more optimistic about that particular effort and this particular class of medicines as something that can kind of move at pandemic speed and create something useful. Again, we won't know for sure until there's a trial, but that's an effort that I'm certainly watching closely, and that I think relative to a vaccine has a better chance of arriving in time to have some benefit for people this year. Although in the long run, you can't quite replace, in terms of population level protection, an effective vaccine.
The vaccine fork in this road has gotten an awful lot of attention from the media, including us. A lot of talk about vaccine. Do you see any indication that maybe that has led to time, effort, money being drawn away from some of the treatment alternatives, so they aren't getting the sort of resources they need and deserve?
I think that shift of attention may obscure the fact that there is still plenty of money going to those efforts, even if it doesn't quite feel that way, given the outsized attention for vaccines, and given the manufacturing challenge inherent here of making multiple millions, hundreds of millions of doses, as opposed to a treatment where you're talking about aiming at a smaller fraction of the population, people that get sick, and beyond that, people that get severely ill, far fewer people, so less of a manufacturing challenge. So it doesn't quite require the same sort of massive global effort, even though you do want to put a lot of effort into making sure that all of the possibilities are tested appropriately and given the support they need to make it to market as rapidly as possible.
I should say thank you so much to Bloomberg Opinion columnist Max Neeson. You can read more on this and other stories from Bloomberg Opinion at Bloomberg.com/opinion and on the terminal by typing in OPIN GO. Coming up, things are bad between the United States and China, and they could get worse. Henrietta Trays of Veda Partners is here to give us the story. This is Balanced Power on Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are mostly higher on global economic optimism. The Dow is up 175 points, S&P up 11, NASDAQ climbing 2 points. Gun makers are in rally mode for a second day. Smith & Wesson is up 33%. Analysts say people will be investing in firearms for a while. Businesses are not ignoring the unrest that's lit up the nation over the past week. Bank of America is donating $1 billion to help community programs and small businesses address economic and racial inequality. And its stores still remain closed, but liquidation sales are now taking place at Pier 1 thanks to online buyers. Meantime, Everything Must Go sales should begin next week at 242 JCPenney stores that are shutting down for good. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Tom has been a teacher for over 40 years. One day, I think one of the students had asked the question and he didn't remember the answer. And I also noticed that he was letting his class out earlier than they were supposed to let out. I was really starting to worry.
Levi and I talked about how it would change our lives, but he was there beside me.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
With COVID-19, so much is unknown.
Is this the worst you've seen?
But we are committed to getting you every piece of information we can as soon as we can.
Tell us about this first big win you have. What is it, 24 million N95 masks?
Fewer unknowns.
Who's winning here? Where is the pressure right now?
That's our goal.
What worries you the most? The time it's going to take for a vaccine?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Bloomberg and...
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
At Asda, we're helping you shop safely by keeping our stores clean and limiting customer numbers so you can keep 2 meters apart. With our Scan and Go mobile app, you can reduce contact at the till too. Asda, we're all in this together. Subject to availability. Mobile data charges may apply.
Whoa, just got a Moonpig reminder that it's your birthday Saturday.
Yeah, I set that up.
Oh, do you know what? I forget one time. Okay, I'm in the app.
Oh, the romantic card section.
I'm full of surprises. Now, what rhymes with babe?
How about just uploading a nice pic? No, wait, I'm not ready.
Hey, I love you from every angle. Now for the gifts. Oh, and flowers.
Heartfelt can happen anywhere with Moonpig.com. Download the app now.
Did you know that with TuneIn's local radio feature, you can stream live FM and AM stations broadcasting in your area? Discover local news, talk, and music stations. Navigate to the local radio section under Browse to listen locally on TuneIn.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Pulls over a man into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship featuring Clemson and LSU.
There are going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
10, pass to the 5, touchdown!
Search classic game replays to listen for free.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic game replays to start listening.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
Yeah, but it's unique times. I think there's unique circumstances, and we're trying
to standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
Hey, y'all, we're taking the Marty Party to a whole new level with the Marty Smith's America podcast with Gerald McCoy.
I truly believe that Carolina made a mistake. Blake Campo. This is not a personal shot at Teddy Bridgewater. This could have been Andy Dalton. This could have been whoever they brought in. Cam has so much left. Somebody's really getting a great one, man. And I don't think people really understand what they're getting.
Search Marty Smith America to listen.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Balance of Power with David Weston.
Coming up on Balance of Power, what does a potential Cold War between the United States and China mean for both countries and the world? Henrietta Trey's of Veda Partners will tell us. But first, let's get a market check with Charlie Pellet.
I thank you very much, David Weston. Happy Tuesday. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing right now. Stocks higher, rising alongside equities in Europe and Asia amid new bouts of stimulus and positive economic signals as coronavirus lockdowns ease. S&P 500 index higher, 2 shares gaining for every one that fell. Tech shares lag behind. We've got Facebook and Apple both trading lower. Right now with the S&P 500 index up 13. That is a gain of 0.5%. Dow Industrials up 190 points, now up 0.8%. NASDAQ higher by 11, a gain of just about 0.1%. 10-year down 8/30 seconds with a yield of 0.68%. Gold is down 0.7%, $17.27 the ounce, and a jump for crude today up 1.3%, $36.53 for West Texas Intermediate crude. SEC Chair Jay Clayton sat down with Bloomberg Radio and Television for a wide-ranging interview this morning with our David Weston, discussing a number of market issues, including greater scrutiny of publicly traded Chinese firms.
The bedrock of our system is good financial information. And this asymmetry, you can call it an unlevel playing field with Chinese-listed companies versus other companies from non-U.S. jurisdictions listed, has gone on for too long.
S&P 500 index recapping up 14 of 3,069, a gain of 0.5%, and gold is down 0.7%, $17.27 the ounce. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Balance of Power continues. Once again, here's your host, David Weston.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. Neither President Trump nor President Xi shows signs that they'll back down in their growing dispute over Hong Kong and over the origins of the coronavirus. What could that mean for a U.S. economic recovery? We welcome now Henrietta Trey. She is Director of Economic Policy for Veda Partners. So, Henrietta, great to have you back with us. Give us a sense of where this dispute is right now. The language, certainly, exchanged back and forth, is not very encouraging. Where does it go next?
Thanks for having me, David. Yeah, the language is extremely troubling, and the latest speech from President Trump was obviously a massive escalation in an issue that's very important to China, which is Hong Kong and its autonomy. And I think what we're going to see from here, and what I'm trying to help my clients work through, is separating out the time horizon between now and November 3rd, the U.S. election. In my experience, it takes about 3 weeks for a president to get a message across to the public, to have a national conversation, sort of switch to a new issue, and that will get you to sort of early October for a good time for President Trump to shift from verbally assaulting China to actually taking real action without having to incur the undue economic consequences that would be so harmful to farmers, manufacturers, and consumers, as we've seen from the last 2 years of the trade war. So between now and let's call it mid to early September, I'm expecting an escalation in rhetoric from here, talk of delisting Chinese companies from U.S. exchanges, imposing additional tariffs. The Commerce Department just announced this this morning that they're going to investigate another alloy, imports of vanadium, which is a key ingredient for steel and chemicals, and potentially imposing tariffs on that under Section 232, the national security header, and basically doing all the legwork so that come September, October of this year, just before the election, the president can take concrete actions if he wants to, whether that's on sanctions, secondary sanctions on financial institutions, even imposing higher tariffs or even changing tariff rates for Hong Kong. Actually taking those concrete steps, I think, is a September, October time horizon event, and everything between now and then is just going to be a slow ramp up of preparation and rhetoric in that direction.
Whatever happened to phase one? Is it gone? We keep hearing that both sides want to keep going ahead with it. But what's going on, for example, with agricultural imports? We heard that the Chinese were cutting back.
Yeah, exactly. Phase one has always been a long shot. If you'd ask any, rational China watcher or import analysis, it was wildly optimistic to think that China would be able to purchase $76 billion over the 2017 import thresholds that they had promised back in January. And from right now, they're functioning at about a 45% level. So they're missing the mark by somewhere close to 65% at this juncture. The only thing keeping farmers afloat right now is this elusive promise of a late October, November harvest of soy that China will purchase from us. So there's a lot of hope. I think that for President Trump, the reality is he doesn't have the ability to pull out of phase one anytime before, call it October, because if you do so before this, the farmers are going to revolt. And remember, you have really important Senate races in Iowa, in Kansas, in Georgia, in North Carolina, all these states that are extraordinarily tethered to trade and are all Republican. So not only does President Trump have a hamstring on the economy and the ability to pull out of the coronavirus pandemic and that economic downturn, but you have the priorities of Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, which is to have and preserve his majority in the United States Senate. So I think that restricts President Trump meaningfully from pulling out of the phase one deal again until that September, October time horizon.
Why wouldn't he just wait until after the November election? I mean, because the farmers that I've talked to are pretty sophisticated about trade issues. And if they saw that, in fact, the president was moving forward and was going to really essentially scuttle the phase one deal, they would know it's going to hurt them, even if it hadn't hit their pocketbook until December or January.
I think that's extremely fair, and the farmers are, as you say, so keen on every single purchase commitment. They're following every single expansion into Brazil or Argentina in the soy space, their pork purchases. They have the whole world on monitor right now, for sure. I think what I'm concerned about is the president's need, or at least his faith, that farmers will stick with him regardless. The ongoing belief that China is causing the United States severe economic harm via IP theft and forced tech transfer practices. Some of that pertains to U.S. seed and, their developments of certain crops. So there is this growing sentiment in the United States that's really been growing since 2017 when the trade war started, that China is a bad actor. They're a nefarious player on the global stage, and they're an enemy of the United States. We've all seen the polling data that shows that 63, 65, 70, 75% of Americans have a negative view of China, in particular after the coronavirus, but that's a trend we've seen since the election. So I'm reminded from your question of an anecdote we used to hear from the administration back in the beginning of the trade war, which was this idea that farmers will abandon President Trump if he imposes tariffs. And the White House would really just not take that seriously because they thought for sure President Trump's supporters are so ardent, as you see from his polling data. Even in states like Nebraska or Wyoming, he's got huge leads and core supporters, even if they are farmers who have been the front lines of the damage in the last 2 years of the trade war. So I think there's so what I'm trying to do here is say, as we look to a boogeyman and Trump gets more aggressive in winning the election in the September-October timeframe, it might take a severe action like escalating with China to deflect away from a 10, 15% unemployment rate or struggling GDP numbers domestically.
And there won't be much effective pressure coming from the other side, will there, in this sense? I find it hard to believe that Joe Biden would come out with a campaign to be soft on China.
No, certainly not. Definitely not. Well said. I think that they're all fighting each other. Well, not fighting each other, but they're all in a race to see who can be more of a China hawk right now. I heard a really interesting conversation with some leadership on the Trade Council on the Democratic side, thinking through what happens if President Trump escalates tariffs from here, say on steel or aluminum or even the 301 tariffs. And in their view, and it was so interesting to listen to, they're saying, if Biden comes in and the tariffs are 35%, that's helpful to their cause in 2021 and beyond, because now they'll have more negotiating room downward with China, more negotiating room with Republicans who will presumably go back to being anti-tariff once President Trump is out of office, and President Biden in this hypothetical would be able to maneuver more and get more, whether it's on financial regulatory reform or even infrastructure spending, in exchange for dropping down whatever trade escalation Trump does between now and then. So certainly it's not in the Democrats' interest to rein it in.
It's very helpful. Thank you so much, Henrietta. Always a treat to have you on. That's Henrietta Trays of Veda Partners. Coming up, we talk with the former head of the OMB, Douglas Holtz-Eakin, about government support for the economy. Is it enough, and is it working? That's next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
You're living in a world built on science.
This is an important update from the government about coronavirus. We all need to stay alert so we can control the virus and reduce the risk of infection. Staying alert means you must stay at home as much as possible. Work from home if you can. Limit contact with others. Keep your distance if you go out. And wash your hands regularly. Do not leave home if you or anyone in your household has symptoms. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Brian Windhorst and the Hoop Collective Podcast.
What about Giannis Antetokounmpo? He is going to be eligible to sign a Supermax extension, which we were projecting to be worth $240 million this summer. Well, if the salary cap drops, and even if he's wonderfully happy in Milwaukee, it may make no sense for him to sign when he can just wait a year and wait for the revenues to recover and then lock in.
Subscribe to Brian Windhorst and the Hoop Collective. Search the Hoop Collective to listen.
How do you keep track of all your favorite stations and podcasts? Easy. You add them to your favorites list. Just find the audio you want to bookmark and tap the heart icon. Then, whenever you want to browse your favorites, you'll find everything under the Favorites tab.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Who says you can't have a laugh while getting serious about America's pastime? On the daily podcast Locked On MLB, comedian and baseball fanatic Paul Francis Sullivan talks about each team, each pennant race, and everything else in the game, from rule changes and controversies to baseball cards and stadium food.
For those of you who are not familiar with me or the old show, I love to obsess over baseball. I'm talking baseball over the Super Bowl. We had a TV showing the division series during my wedding.
Search Locked On MLB on TuneIn to listen today.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man, into the end zone,
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There's going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night, and there's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
10, rise to the 5, touchdown! Search classic game replays to listen for free.
Are you ready for the realest first-hand take of what's happening in the NBA? On their podcast, All the Smoke, former NBA players Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson bring their fiery intensity to the mic, dishing on the latest news and drama from on and off the court without boundaries.
Half man, half amazing. My friend, our brother, Vince Carter, man, welcome to the show.
Yo, what's up, man?
What's up, my brother?
Man,
Search All the Smoke on TuneIn to listen.
And breaking news 24 hours a day
at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks are higher. This update brought to you by SEI. Crises emphasize character and partnership. One mission, one community. SEI. Go to SEIC.com/IMS. Stocks are higher alongside equities in Europe and Asia amid new bouts of stimulus and positive economic signals as coronavirus lockdowns ease. The S&P 500 index higher now by 14 points at 3,070, up 0.5%. The Dow's up 185 points, up 0.7%. Nasdaq is up 18. That's a gain of 0.2%. 10-year down 7/32, yield now 0.68%. Gold down 0.8%, 17.26 the ounce, and crude West Texas Intermediate up 2.8%, 36.44 a barrel. OPEC and its allies edging closer to a consensus on extending production cuts. So again, recapping, stocks higher with the S&P up now by 13 points, up 0.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Balance of power continues. Once again, here's your host for the Tuesday edition, David Weston.
Thank you so very much, Charlie Pellet. Washington has already pumped trillions of dollars into the U.S. economy in both fiscal and monetary support, but some say that still isn't enough. To give us his read, we welcome now Douglas Holtz-Eakin, American Action Forum President and former Director of the Office of Management and Budget. So, Doug, welcome back. It's great to have you here. Before we turn to what might more need to be done, let's talk about what's already been done. I understand you were up on the Hill just this morning testifying about the effectiveness of what's been done. Tell us what you told the Senate.
I think if you take a look at the CARES Act, we did a lot for households, checks to individuals, pandemic unemployment insurance for the 40 million odd new claimants, and I think that's been quite successful. The April report on personal income said that disposable personal income rose at an annual rate of 2.1 trillion, in large part because government benefits rose at a rate of 3 trillion. The saving rate in that report was 33%, so people have cash, they're holding on to it, they're provisioned for the next couple of months. On the small business side, there's been a lot of complaints about the Paycheck Protection Program. Many of them are true. Despite that, it got over $530 billion out the door to small businesses, over 4 million loans in the space of a month, which is a pretty enormous accomplishment for a government program. The bad news is we set up provisions for large business lending, and they have done essentially nothing. The Main Street business facility is yet to be operational. The municipal liquidity facility, not a dime gone out yet. So I think the $500 billion sitting in the Treasury to support lending to states, localities, and mid-sized businesses, they're just missing in action, and that's what we need to do next.
So give us an overview there. It was $2 trillion all told, right? Roughly in the CARES Act?
Roughly, yes.
Yeah. So at $500 billion still hasn't been spent? Is that what you're saying?
$500 billion is just sitting in the Treasury. Of the money allocated to support lending, literally $1.8 billion has gone out.
Why?
So, good question. This is mystifying to me. The Federal Reserve has proven it can move quickly and on a large scale. Look at its balance sheet, open-ended provision of liquidity, zero rates. It can do that. The Treasury worked with the Small Business Association on the PPP, so it can move fast and get a lot out. So why did those two, in combination, go 2 months without successfully launching these facilities? I just don't understand it.
Well, you understand the government so terribly well. Is this a political issue?
I think it's a design issue. I think there's a legitimate concern on the part of the Federal Reserve that they not set up loan programs that lose money. That's in their charter. So the Treasury's job is to backstop the Fed, make sure the Fed is held harmless, and that $500 billion can be leveraged up into something that looks like, $3, $4, $5 trillion worth of additional lending. If they're too cautious with that, and the term sheets look to me to be too tight, people aren't going to take up those facilities when they're open, and they're still not open. So it could be just harder than I appreciate. It could be that they're being too cautious in the way they're approaching this, but through whatever circumstances, the money's just not going out.
What about the $1.5 trillion, if my arithmetic is right, that has more or less gone out? How effective has it been? You say it's gotten into people's pockets, the personal income's up, even if they're saving it rather than spending it. But is it having real effects on the real economy, on unemployment, on spending, on things like that?
I think this is a circumstance where this notion that you just write checks to people and let them go out and spend it and stimulate the economy is just missing the root problem. This is not a demand problem. This is a supply problem. We have shut down large amounts of the economy. Even as we try to open it up, it will be opened up as fast as people are comfortable going to work and businesses are comfortable opening their businesses and having people at work and having customers in them. And so I think the major challenges going forward are not going to be getting enough money into the economy. We did that. We maintained the liquidity. We held on to the infrastructure of a lot of businesses, and we kept a lot of people in their jobs. Now we're going to have to figure out how to operate successfully in the face of the virus. It's not gone. It's still out there. How do we run our businesses and conduct our economic affairs with it still present?
Is that a matter of money?
No, I don't think it's just a matter of money.
Yeah.
Think of the restaurants. You got restaurants, they have really tiny kitchens. Is that going to work anymore? Or are we going to have bigger kitchens? What about the dining areas? You got to spread things out. The business model that used to be successful now might not make it at the previous price point. So how do you sort of rethink, and economies do this coming out of recessions all the time, sort of move from one industry to another, get different employment patterns. But also in some cases, like a meatpacking facility, it is just money. How can we reconfigure it to operate safely in the future?
Did we make a mistake in retrospect by making the unemployment benefits so attractive? I mean, there are lots of stories about people can actually make more money being on unemployment than actually working. So that's sort of a perverse incentive, isn't it?
Looking back, it was the ideal policy if you wanted people to stay at home, not try to go to work, and not transmit the virus or catch it. Looking forward, it doesn't work. Our estimates are that 63% of American workers would make more on UNI than on their previous job. And that's just too big a hurdle. So Congress will have to do something with that. You can't have a big bonus like that tied to staying out of work. You either continue to provide people a lot of money, just make it available if they also work, or you take this temporary policy and acknowledge that it had to go away at some point and, start phasing it down quickly.
Well, that's part of the question, because there's talk about extension, right, on the Democrat side now. So what you're suggesting is maybe you don't just let it fall off a cliff, but you really got to feather it down.
Yeah, I can see the concerns about a cliff, but I think the more important thing is to make sure that it's available for those who work, so that we're not stopping people from going back to work, and we acknowledge it's a temporary policy and we start phasing it out. The only thing you don't want to do is extend it as it is. That's the mistake.
So what about the HEROES Act? I mean, because there's a phase 4, as we know, that the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, really wants through. Is she right in all or in part?
There are pieces of the HEROES Act that I think make perfect sense. There's a large amount in there that has nothing to do with recovery from a pandemic and really shouldn't make the cut. As you know, the response to this has been an enormous fiscal policy. It's moved the deficit from $1 trillion to something that will probably be $4 trillion before we're done. We're going to jump the national debt up to 100% of GDP. I'm in favor of doing all that as a response to the downdrafts, which has been historically large. But stay disciplined and don't do things that you don't need to do in these circumstances.
What about the state and local government part? There seems to be a broad consensus among Republican and Democratic governors that they really need some money.
Yeah, here's the tough part. So there are 3 different issues. Issue number 1 is states and localities had the brunt of the expenditure to deal with the health crisis. And since that was in everyone's interest, it's probably appropriate that the taxpayer pick that up. That's one set of funds. Right. There's another set of funds which probably aren't appropriate, and that is existing structural problems in budgets. The poster child of this is bad pension plans in places like Illinois. And then there's the issue of lost revenue. When the businesses lost revenue, we said if you're a small business, we'll give you a grant. If you're a large business, we'll give you a loan. What do you do with the states?
Yeah, no kidding. No taxes coming in is the problem. Doug, it's always such a pleasure to have you with us. That's Douglas Holtz-Eakin of the American Action Forum. So that's going to do it for the 2 hours of Balance of Power for today. I'm David Weston. This is Bloomberg, and thank you for joining us.
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
This is an important update from the government about coronavirus symptoms and testing. If you have any one of the following symptoms, a high temperature, a new continuous cough, loss of taste or smell, you can now get tested. Do not leave home for any reason other than to get tested. Find out how to get a test and how long to isolate at nhs.uk/coronavirus. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Buckle up, race fans. NASCAR is back in the driver's seat. And you can cut straight to the action here. With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events. As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick, Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track. Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races. With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic Game Replays to start listening. Want to relive the glory of college football?
Ball's over a man, into the end zone,
Come explore TuneIn's classic Game Replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There's going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be one team hold up the trophy.
Pass to the 5! Touchdown! Search Classic Game Replays to listen for free.
Hey, y'all, we're taking the Marty Party to a whole new level with the Marty Smith's America podcast with Gerald McCoy.
I truly believe that Carolina made a mistake letting Cam go. This is not a personal shot at Teddy Bridgewater. This could have been Andy Dalton. This could have been whoever they brought in. Cam has so much left. Somebody's really getting the great one, man. And I don't think people really understand what they're getting.
Search Marty Smith America to listen.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
Hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
Live from New York and live from New Jersey, streaming on YouTube. It is Tuesday, June 2nd, 2020. And Jason, making sense out of today's environment. I feel like we've all been talking about this throughout the day as we were planning for our show today. Investors seem to be really kind of saying, okay, we've got a virus, we've got civic unrest, but we're going to push stocks higher. And that's not just a U.S. story, but it's Europe and Asia as well.
Yeah, as you look across the Bloomberg, the screen, the WEI screen, World Equity Indices, all you see is green. Across the planet. So interesting to see that, understand what's underneath it. We're going to get into the stock and market side of things, but also the corporate side, and understand where we are at this moment, because we are certainly at a moment, as you say, of unrest and uncertainty. But let's get a check on those numbers first and talk about that green trade. Hey, Charlie Pellet.
Well, hello there, and here's what's going on. We've got the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing. Happy Tuesday, as you say, green on the screen with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all pushing higher right now. 0.5% gain in the S&P, up 15 at 3,071. NASDAQ up 20 points, a gain there of 0.2%, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average up 192, higher by 0.8%. You mentioned the WEI screen. Interesting, because when you look at that screen, you look at the year-to-date column, there's only one that is higher, and that is NASDAQ, up now by 6.9% in the year-to-date column. Bottom line, those stocks rallying today with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ higher. Right now, we have got gold down 0.7%, $17.27 the ounce. The 10-year down 6/30 seconds with a yield there of 0.67%. And West Texas Intermediate crude up 3.1% at $36.56 a barrel. Bottom line, the equities pushing higher alongside equities in Europe and Asia amid new bounce of stimulus and positive economic signals as coronavirus lockdowns ease. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. And the top story, it feels like today, Carol, is trying to explain this market amid a backdrop that is, as we said, uncertain and one of unrest. So let's set the Business Week agenda if we can. Vincent Signorella is global macro strategist for Bloomberg News. He's joining us on the phone from White Plains. He, of course, is a contributor to the Macro Squawk Desk. Squawk, as you know, is a real-time curated news. It's audio streamed directly through your Bloomberg terminal. Just check that out at Squawk Go on your launchpad. He's joined by Dave Wilson, our stocks editor for Bloomberg, joining us from New Jersey. So, Dave, take us just a level deeper, if you can, on the trade today. We heard Charlie with the numbers, but what's jumping out at you from a theme perspective?
Do we have Dave?
We don't have Dave. So, Vince Signorella, you tell me what's going on. Somebody tell me what the heck is going on here, Vince.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're definitely seeing a good rally, mostly coming out of the Dow and the S&P. NASDAQ lagging, primarily because of a drop in Facebook and Apple. Facebook Chief Executive Zuckerberg hosted a nearly hour-long video call with U.S. civil rights leaders and essentially left them wanting for this sort of hands-off, moderate approach that he's been taking. Basically, they were left disappointed. That is weighing on the stock, and it's maybe the first sign we're seeing that the protests are actually having an effect on the real market, because people are very critical of what Facebook has done and Twitter has done with regards to postings by the president.
Well, it is kind of interesting, but, we did move down, we then moved back up. So I'm curious, Vince, some of the conversations that you are having and what people are saying. Like, I think that's interesting about the tech sector, but what else are people saying about kind of the trade? Because it's hard not, we kick off the morning and we're doing our planning show and we're all reading in, watching images, and it's hard not to be affected. And some of it, for, those of us who are in major cities, it's in our backyards. It's not just the virus, but it's the protests. And I do wonder, how should we, you've seen crises, you've seen different market cycles. How does an investor, what's the lens that they look through?
I think what, and it don't mean in any way, shape, or form to sound cold-hearted, but investors do look through these types of things. We're seeing a lot of reopenings. New York City is scheduled to be reopened next Monday. The feeling, the mood is from what we've seen so far, as cities and states have reopened, they've gone to maybe 3/4 back to where they were before, which is pretty substantial, pretty quickly. I don't think New York City will be that quick. We're going to probably have a much slower open than a lot of other places. But investors are looking past this immediate moment. Remember that, for a lot of the older folks, myself included, people are trying to compare this to 1968. And for what it's worth, having lived through that, we had the Vietnam War, we've got the war on COVID. And we had the dual assassinations of Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy, and now we have, Mr. Floyd. And there are a lot of comparisons. But I think this feels like the nation has really taken a hold of this. And if this really feels like something finally may be done on the issue, and I think there's a little positive optimism that if we can get past this, maybe down the road, corporations might lead, do the right thing, and maybe we'll finally, there's always going to be racism, like there'll always be poor. But if we can get past the biggest hurdles, the market will feel good about it, and hopefully humanity will feel good about ourselves for a change.
Well, and what we heard yesterday, right, Jason, from the head of Operation Hope, you can't have rainbows without storms. And it's, it sounds so trite, but, it's often in these moments of crises that we bring about dramatic changes and often changes for the better.
Well, the other thing John Hope Bryant said, which I think is very, very relevant to this and an economic and market discussion, is that this is a crisis that's ultimately about poverty,
right?
And economics.
Exactly. And it's why we keep a watch on it. We're going to be talking a lot about, I feel like, that theme over the next few hours. Dave Wilson, come on in, though. Vince setting the stage for us. What is the one thing you think investors need to know on this Tuesday about the trade?
Well, this really does have a look of sort of the more economically sensitive areas of the market leading the way, some of which have not done all so well when you look at energy stocks, which are actually the day's best performers among the 11 main industry groups in the S&P 500. After that, you see raw material producers, industrial companies, financial companies to some extent as well, and they're getting some help from what's going on with bond yields at this point, the way that relationships are kind of moving in their favor in terms of yield. So, that's really what kind of jumps out. And, let's throw in Western Union, biggest gain in the S&P 500, up about 11% after we reported that they made a takeover offer to one of their rivals, MoneyGram. We haven't heard from either company on that score yet, but they haven't denied it either. They just declined to comment, so that'll be one to watch.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you both so much. We really appreciate it. Vince Signorella, Dave Wilson. Dave, you'll be back with us in just a bit for your chart and later on your stock of the day. Well, coming up, we're going to try and make sense of what's going on in the world, not just in Washington, although we're going to go there with our Washington Bureau Chief coming up in just a few minutes, but also out on the West Coast with Mark Zuckerberg coming under fire. And if you're looking at Twitter or Instagram, you're seeing a lot of resignations of executives and programmers at Facebook. That is a big story for sure.
People taking a stand and fighting back. And I think this plays into what Vince was saying, that, hopefully we do get to a better place on the other side. So we're talking about leadership that we're seeing around the country. We have a couple of leaders. Frances Allen, the CEO of Checkers and Rallies, she's going to be with us. And Frances Fry at Harvard Business School, she was tapped to help fix the cultures at Uber and WeWork. So we have a lot to get to over the next couple of hours.
Big assignment, big assignment, to say the least. Totally. All right, let's do the Bloomberg Business Week Bite of the Day. One number that tells us a lot. Today's number, Carol, is more than 4.
That's right. American soybean exporters selling as much as 4 cargoes of U.S. soybeans to Chinese state-run buyers, according to those in the know, showing that some transactions, are still going through, even after officials in Beijing ordered a pause in some purchases. Chinese government officials have told major state-run agricultural companies to halt imports of some American farm goods, including soybeans. People familiar telling our team at Bloomberg News, they said that yesterday. U.S. cotton and corn imports by state buyers, though, have also been paused. So, that's another thing we're keeping a watch on, U.S. and China.
Yeah, lots of things to keep an eye on, that's for
sure.
Totally. Keeping an eye on world and national headlines is Nancy Lyons down in D.C. Hey, Nancy.
Hey there. Former Vice President and presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden is calling for everyone to speak out against systemic racism. In the wake of the death of George Floyd, Biden, speaking in Philadelphia today, says Americans of all backgrounds and creeds must take a stand.
But it's going to take more than talk. We've had talk before. We've had protests before. We've got to now vow to make this at least an era of action and reverse the systemic racism with a long overdue concrete changes.
Biden is calling for immediate reforms in Congress as a down payment on what he said would be major efforts to address racism if he wins the presidency. He says it's time to pass legislation that would give true meaning to our constitutional promise of legal protection under the law. Well, major labels are joining other music industry groups and artists in pledging a blackout today to protest the death of George Floyd. SiriusXM will silence all music channels for 3 minutes at 3 p.m. Wall Street time. Also in part of its blackout Tuesday, Spotify is including an 8-minute, 46-second track of silence on selected playlists and podcasts. That's the length of time that Floyd was held down. Artists are also using the hashtags "The Show Must Be Paused" and "Black Lives Matter." Prosecutors say 6 Atlanta police officers have been charged after a dramatic video showing authorities pulling 2 young people from a car during protests over the death of Floyd. In the video, officers are seen breaking windows of the car, yanking a woman, and tasing a man. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
Why can't you just go to some remote island and wait till all this is over?
The range of outcomes is so wide.
Because it's your job.
What do you think some of the structural changes might result?
Fortunately, it's our job too.
How's the value done in this market?
Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz.
It's very hard to make a forecast.
Bloomberg Markets.
This could be a lower for longer type of hit.
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Sweet strawberry icing. You're in Goodwill, and just past that vintage denim jacket you spot miniature donut earrings. You lean in. Ah, that's the scent of shopping success. Because at Goodwill, every item you buy funds local job training and more. So bring home those donut earrings and bring home so much good to your community. Goodwill. Bring good home. Brought to you by Goodwill and the Ad Council.
Mark it up.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Get your cook on with Asda, with Uncle Ben's rice 250 grams for just £1, and our Butcher's Selection chicken breast fillets only £3.40 for 650 grams. Why not whack it in the wok? At Asda, we're committed to low prices every day on the quality products you need. Asda. Selected stores and lines subject to availability.
Where do sports, culture, and basketball nostalgia collide? On their podcast, Knuckleheads, NBA veterans Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles sit down with athletes, musicians, and entertainers to get brutally honest, totally unguarded conversations about everything from current events to untold stories from the golden era of sports.
O'Neal. You know that, right? I tried to tip dunk all the free throw line one time.
Search Knuckleheads on TuneIn to listen.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
How do you keep track of all your favorite stations and podcasts? Easy. You add them to your favorites list. Just find the audio you want to bookmark and tap the heart icon. Then, whenever you want to browse your favorites, you'll find everything under the Favorites tab.
The Woj Pod with Adrian Wojnarowski.
Doris, you had reason to believe that you needed to get a test for the coronavirus.
Right. Well, let's just start with the headline, which is I did test positive for COVID-19. I was so tired from Saturday the 14th through Tuesday, March 17th. I kid you not, I could not be out of bed for 5 minutes without needing to go back to bed and lay down.
Search the Woj Pod to listen.
Who says you can't have a laugh while getting serious about America's pastime? On the daily podcast Locked On MLB, comedian and baseball fanatic Paul Francis Sullivan talks about each team, each pennant race, and everything else in the game, from rule changes and controversies to baseball cards and stadium food.
For those of you who are not familiar with me or the old show, I love to obsess over baseball. I'm talking baseball over the Super Bowl. We had a TV showing the division series during my wedding.
Search Locked On MLB on TuneIn to listen today.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks continue to grind higher. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ are all advancing right now amid new bouts of stimulus and positive economic signals as coronavirus lockdowns ease. Right now, we have got the S&P 500 index up 13, up 0.4%. The Dow up 165, up almost 0.7%. NASDAQ is up 14. That is a gain of 0.1%. 10-year down 5/30 seconds with a yield of 0.67%. Gold down 0.8%. 17.25 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude up 3.2%. 36.58 a barrel. Again, recapping here. Equity is higher. S&P up 13, now up 0.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie Pellet, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Well, this is the guy I've been wanting to talk to try and make sense of everything that's going on a little south of us down in the nation's capital. He is our Washington Bureau Chief and Executive Editor there in the nation's capital, Craig Gordon from Bloomberg, joining us on the phone from Maryland. First, Craig, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing fine. I'm out here in Bethesda, Maryland, in the leafy suburbs, so I'm plenty removed from the action downtown, which would be about 3 or 4 blocks from where our office is. But None of us have been there in about 10 weeks, so we're feeling okay out here.
And tell me what is going on. I mean, you've got a team reporting on this all the time. I mean, I saw some pretty arresting images from Jen Epstein, who I know, works very closely with you on our White House beat and others who have been documenting this. I mean, what do we need to know maybe that we haven't seen and the important context of what's going on with the president and the response right now in Washington?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think the thing that is important to remember right now is that Trump actually does have a lot of authority to do the thing that he said that he wants to do, which is potentially send, U.S. troops into U.S. cities to try to sort of quell the unrest. There's laws that date back to 1807 that allow him to do this. Usually they're only invoked when the local officials, the governor, the mayor, sort of calls the White House and says, kind of send in the troops. It happened during the Rodney King riots in Los Angeles when George H.W. Bush did it. There's some other instances scattered through history, but in most cases it's local officials making the request. The law does allow Trump to do it if he sees there's a need to do it or feels there's a need to do it, and essentially overrule the local officials. So it's something we're watching very closely. Now, Pentagon officials today held a briefing and told us, they don't think that they will need to invoke this, literally active military response. The National Guard in some of these states and cities can probably handle whatever the protesters can throw at them. But it's very much a live question. And I think based on the reaction, Trump's reaction last night, he's kind of itching to do it. So we're on pretty high alert for any kind of mobilization like that.
So, Craig, what do you make of what happened last night? So the president makes some comments, and then he does this walk, from what I understand, an unannounced walk, right, across the street from the White House through Lafayette Square to visit St. John's Episcopal Church. And then he holds up a Bible. So, I don't know. What have you heard about that, and what was the president thinking?
Well, what our reporter Jennifer Jacobs, who was actually on the scene, was in the press, the press pool essentially when Trump made that walk, was that, people may remember the New York Times, Bloomberg, and others reported that they had moved Trump into the sort of underground safety bunker at the White House on Friday night. George W. Bush went there on 9/11. It does get you to Cheney, if anyone saw that movie. Mm-hmm. Was kind of hustled there pretty forcefully on 9/11. So, it's used to keep the leaders of the nation safe. I don't think that was really an image that Donald Trump wanted kind of hanging out there, that he was, as his own son put it in a tweet, sort of cowering in the basement while the protests were raging outside of the White House. They seemed, Trump himself seemed kind of eager to erase that image. And what Jennifer reported was that in a meeting with the military leaders who were at the White House to discuss some of the response, he raised the possibility of walking over to St. John's Episcopal Church. And again, anyone who's visited the White House knows there's sort of a park right across the street, Lafayette Square, and then across from that is this church. I've been there many times on pool duty covering presidents through the years. It's a frequent Sunday stop for presidents, not so much Trump, but it's sort of right there. It's in a walking distance of the White House. He sort of made the decision he wanted to give it a try, and when the president says that, the team sort of scrambles to try to make it happen. We're trying to sort out today exactly who gave the order or how it came down that the protesters were sort of cleared out from the front of the White House so that the president could make that walk, which is sort of essentially across Pennsylvania Avenue, across this rather small park, and then right to the following corner. There's some reporting right now that Attorney General Bill Barr, who people may have seen on TV, went over to kind of view the site before we knew Trump was going to make the walk, was the one who actually gave the order to kind of clear the park. That's a little bit in dispute right now. We're trying to get to the bottom of it in talking to Justice Department officials, but clearly an order was given because, again, anyone who saw the video and Jennifer Jacobs was there for us, those military police cleared that spot out pretty aggressively, some tear gas, some riot shields, etc., on what at that point up till then had been a fairly peaceful protest. So, look, the imagery, if you're a fan of Donald Trump, the imagery was probably pretty dramatic. He's sort of striding through this kind of, troubled area where this protest had just happened, goes to the church, holds up a Bible. Obviously, he's taking kind of withering fire on this from Democrats who say, he essentially cleared out a protest simply for a photo op. The religious leaders, the Catholic Archbishop in Washington, the Episcopalian bishop who kind of essentially oversees that church, said it was sort of horrific that you would stage a photo op at a religious site with the Bible itself. So obviously very split opinions on that. I think Donald Trump honestly thinks he had a pretty good day yesterday.
Right. All right. So, Craig, we're going to continue our conversation in a minute, but before we go, just 30 seconds or so, what does the president do today? What's his state of mind today from what you